go. So, your name's Amandanita?
That is just my fun Instagram name. That's a play
Okay, cool.
on mushrooms.
All right, that's kind of what I thought it was. I'm like, fuck, I don't remember that name when I was at Fit for Service. I thought it was just Amanda.
It's just Amanda. Yeah, Amandanita. It was someone had called me that one time because we were talking about Amanita muscaria mushrooms. And it's like, oh, it kind of sounds like your name. And I'm like, maybe it shall be.
I dig that. I think that's a great move. Super good move. Dude, thank you so much for coming on this. Really, like I said, I'm kind of playing with the podcast a little bit, and right now this is one of the subjects I'm back being interested in. I kind of had last year focused on some other stuff, and after Fit for Service with you guys and kind of getting this reconnection back to that side of things, I'm more drawn to it, and so that's bringing now more curiosity back to the podcast of me getting to talk to people. And so having you on as someone who's working like within the psychedelics and business side of that and facilitating treatment and working with clients, I have a lot of questions, and I'd love to know more.
Yeah, fantastic. So a question for me is, when you say getting back on the other side, did you kind of have like a time with psychedelics and then away from them? Or when you say the other side, like other side of what?
So I would say 2019. So January of 29, is that right? Or is that January 2020? I'm not sure now. Either way.
Last 2 years are hard.
Yeah, so had a couple years starting in probably 2018 where I'd started using psychedelics, whether that was just mushrooms on my own or microdosing, things like that. And then eventually Bonnie and I made our way to Costa Rica, did ayahuasca, had a great experience with that, and have been using psychedelics as part of therapy in our lives and just a way to connect and with ourselves since. I did notice over the course of last year that I just wasn't building in time to check back in with it. And once I kind of refound that calling, and I've kind of had some time now to like remind myself that it isn't like I don't need a week, right? Like of free time. Like, hey man, we can go take 5 hours,
right,
and go touch base and see where we're at and make sure the compass is pointed the direction we want it to. So it was just more of got in my own way schedule wise and wasn't giving myself time to really do a bigger not treatment, but a bigger session to see what else is there.
Cool.
So yeah, so that's kind of my story. Now, how do you get here? Where are you from? How does that happen?
What is the story of me?
Yes, tell me your origins.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm sure you know this too from being on different podcasts, is that, your story or our story kind of does become this mythology, right? And it's like, done this and I was raised here. And so lately, as I'm actually starting up my own podcast again, I had one a few years back with a good friend of mine, but now I'm focusing a little bit more on psychedelics and everyone's stories. I've noticed that each time I tell my story, I really try to dig, like we can only present our past from the lens of the present. It's the only thing we ever have access to. So Amanda telling my story of who I am now is different than me telling my story 5 years ago, or even 1 year ago, or a few days ago. So in trying to bring a little fresh perspective to that, how did I get here?
Listen, I'm pretty aware that there's very few people that end up in the line of work that you're in, that it's been a real fucking comfortable path. So
yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. But for me, I grew up in Southern California to a family of 2 older sisters. So I was the baby, and my older sisters were 5 and 10 years older. So growing up, I really did have a lot of time with just my parents. And they were, and still are, very fundamental Christian, kind of evangelical. So came from that background. And really growing up, I've realized recently that I grew up in Irvine, California. So in my school, in elementary school and junior high, that was the time, in the 90s, where pretty much everyone was expected, all of the families like went to church, right? And maybe there was like one, Muslim kid that we didn't understand. And I remember there was the one girl whose parents didn't go to church. And to us, they were like, well, what do you do? Like, are you witches? Are you pagan? Whatever that word means, right? Like it was very, and maybe there was varying degrees of the parents who actually really either had any sort of faith at all, but it was very common to be in that paradigm. And it was when like the yin yang symbol was bad and yoga was still kind of like weird and bad. So I kind of had that paradigm growing up, and so much so that I was always rebellious. So I was always the kid that would annoy my mom and ask why 1,000 times.
Same.
You know,
Same, 100%.
100%. Like anytime I was in, especially church, and any sort of youth group or anything, like the answer I always ended up getting, because I would push the pastor so far, is like, just ask God later, like when you're in heaven. That was always the answer. Was like, we don't know. Just ask God. And I was like, oh gosh, well, okay. But I was always curious, and I sought so deeply as a young person to have this quote unquote like personal relationship with God. But it never made sense to me, because God to me was a paradigm of punishment, of anger, that he had these qualities of jealousy and anger, and he was always just so angry at us until Jesus came and then died for our sins, and then we could finally be in his presence, right? So to me, I didn't want to have any personal relationship with this father, this spirit, all of these things I was being told, but I still got a lot out of the community, and I still got a lot out of the youth group and the friendship and the church. And it wasn't until I left that I realized that.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't until I realized the value of community until I didn't have it. So went to college at Point Loma Nazarene University, which is Nazarene, if anyone's not familiar, is a very strict denomination of Christianity. And there's a school in San Diego that's on top of the ocean. It was named like top surf school on the whole planet. Like one of the dorms, you could walk down the steps and just go surfing. So beautiful location, ocean beach, like lots of hippies, like, so I was thrown into this college age, going down to Mexico to party, had friends at San Diego State. And what I found in college was my first awakening, in that all of us there were quote unquote Christian or religious, but we were in such in-depth religious studies and community there that we all started to truly question, right? And one of the first realizations I had was in a tiny little school within the tiny little Bible department. There were like between 2 or 3 professors. Those professors completely disagreed on the nature of God, the nature of predestination, of all of these things. It's like, okay, if they can't even agree, and they are teaching in the same tiny school in the same religion, like how this is starting to have cracks for me. Coincidentally, at that time, around age, I'd say 18 or 19, even though I was kind of like a good little Christian kid, I would drink sometimes on the weekends, but like overall, my group of friends was very tight and very close and pretty sweet considering that age. Somehow we found mushrooms. I don't even remember who gave them to us. We had hardly any knowledge, but somehow looking back, I remember that we knew they were sacred.
So this is in college?
This is in college.
So you're 20-ish?
About 19, I'd
okay.
say.
Okay. So 19 at a very strict religious college from a pretty intense religious background we found mushrooms.
To that.
Okay.
And I had a sister who, when I was like 15, 16, I was going to like underground like warehouse raves in Los Angeles with her, because she was like 22, 23. So in my view, I still had the idea like drugs bad. I never did any drugs. I didn't do any acid, any like at that time it wasn't called Molly, it was called ecstasy.
Right. It's different.
And like you never know what you were getting. It had like a happy face or something on it, and like hopefully it had whatever in it, right? Like that, my paradigm for drugs was like I'd smoked pot a few times and that was fine, and that had started to like cannabis, which was again not called cannabis, was weed to us.
Weed.
That started to allow me to just take off that tight clenched dogma and ideology I had around everything and start to question comfortably. So I think cannabis wove its way in, and then somehow we happened upon mushrooms. So my girlfriends and I decide to go out to the Pacific Crest Trail. Like we're going to go hike out in nature. We're going to be away from everyone. So we had this idea, like we don't want to be around technology. We don't want to be around television. We want to be out away from people, because, we just had this sense within us that there was something really powerful in this, to us, like we weren't calling it medicine, but just mushrooms. We were like, there's something powerful here. And I still to this day remember each and every moment. Here it is, 19 years later, that I remember that journey. I mean, if I was an artist, I could draw out every scene. Everywhere I sat with an hour with a group of ants and just watched them weave their way and live in their completely their own universe, and just marveled at nature. I sat with a rock for another 40 minutes and just marveled at the beauty of my insignificance compared to this living being that had been there for hundreds of years watching over the valley. And I felt, I just come with a blink of an eye in and out of this planet. And so that first journey shifted my perspective so much from this, I don't think it's necessarily a Christian idea, but it's like a Western religious idea that, man is of the highest order and we're here to just dominate this planet, and everything else, we can do whatever we want and cut down the trees and use the rocks. And it put me in the ecosystem in such a humble place. And it gives me chills thinking about it now. It was such an awakening to the depth that I could feel and a connection to nature, which up to that point was considered evil or bad or pagan or witch or all these words,
It's very, very interesting, the hangups that religion brings in. I think it's rad that you guys, I guess, had some sense of treating it like a sacrament, whereas, at 19, man, I hear people talking about their first mushroom experience. Do you have any idea, like, what dosage now, that if you're looking back, try to guess?
Yeah, I think we had about a half eighth, which is about 1.75 or 2 grams or so, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Okay, so full on, yeah. 2 grams is definitely enough to be like, oh, I've took mushrooms.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It was, it was intense. Luckily we didn't get all too far. It's funny with hiking, quote unquote, with mushrooms, like at least in my experience, we didn't get too far, because every place you go to is like this whole world.
Yeah.
And you end up staying in a small place for a long time.
Yeah, it brings magic back.
It brings it back, yeah. And at that time, it was just like really close friends that were all taking care of each other. We didn't even know the term set and setting, but it was intrinsic. And looking back now with perspective on my life, I trust that the mushrooms have called me to this path, and they knew where I was at that point, and they knew that I was young and sweet and innocent, and I needed to have giggles, and I needed to have the trees and the connection and the beauty at that time. And then to come down, we all make spaghetti together back at the campsite, and we're just feeling so connected and looking at the stars. And with that specific group of friends, I ended up having about 5 or 6 other journeys over the next few years, always safe in nature together, always with just us and like the right music. And so I never really had what some might consider a bad trip. I had some difficult moments, or I had some moments of looking in the mirror and finding distortions in my face and getting a little bit scared, but I always felt very protected by the group. And I learned to trust that, I was going to come back from the journey. Eventually we'd all come down, we're going to be fine. Yeah. So I learned to trust that medicine. So fast forward, I lived my life in my 20s in San Diego. I started to do stand-up comedy. I was producing these huge events at a house I lived in that were called San Diego house parties.
No
and they were
way.
like, this was like a legend, man. So my friend and I, Heather, we started creating, we're like, what if we create house parties, which were our favorite? Like, instead of going to a bar where everyone's kind of segregated by punk bar and like the cool kid hipster bar and like the downtown, dress up kids. We're like, at house parties, everyone comes together and everyone just like brings a drink and shares and becomes friends. So what if we curated house parties that had bands and artists and like fire breathers, and we just created a space and we called it San Diego House Parties, like very simple.
Where did you host this?
Well, I had a house in Bankers Hill, which was kind of like near downtown San Diego, overlooking the harbor.
Okay, I know where you're at.
Yeah, like right where the plane path is, like over Little Italy airport. And somehow we got this house. We rented it. It was like a 5-bedroom house, and it had a 2,000 square foot basement underneath that was unfinished. So the first thing we did the first weekend is one of our dads, he was a contractor. And he just comes in and he's like, we're going to build this out. We're going to build a floor. We're going to build all the walls so this can be a space for you guys.
Hell yeah.
Just a bunch of us, you know, like got like a bathtub of beers and like just worked on painting and building out this basement. And then we put in couches and, you know, records on the wall. And that's where we had like our TV, and we would just smoke weed and watch movies and listen to music. And it was amazing.
That sounds like my basement.
We had this space for bands too. We had a huge space, tons of people. And it was quiet enough because it was kind of under where the hill was. And the way this house, it was so incredible. On one side of the house, there was construction that was taking forever because these condos couldn't get built. And on the other side was a community garden. Like the entire other side of the block was just a community garden with no houses. So we could technically kind of make whatever noise we wanted, and there wasn't really any neighbors.
So no one gave a shit. They're fucking incredible.
It was incredible. And I was there for 6 years. Like this place was, and yeah, it was on Front and Ivy, where the streets, if anyone's in San Diego, that's the corner that it's on. It's there. It's still a beautiful house. We had artists like from Coachella that came like the day after Coachella to play shows. Like we had bananas shows here. But for me, what that was it was the beginning of organizing community, right? Of like getting the bands together, getting their equipment, getting the kegs. Like it was always a costume theme, and it was like free entrance, you know, if you wear a costume, and it's $5 if not. We have food at midnight, and we would all bring around cupcakes. Like all the girls would be like, it's snack time. And they were just epic parties. And to this day, when I go back to San Diego, there'll be someone randomly on the street or somewhere that's like, San Diego house parties. Like people remembered. It was a time. Like it was a time in San Diego for sure.
Dude, that's incredible. What a cool thing, like memories and experience that you created, most likely for a number of people that didn't want the regular outlet. Like I fucking love that, right? Like I just love the difference in community from the bar scene to whatever it is. Man, community's been such a big one, and that's been one that's been hammering me more and more. Especially, I'm so lucky to get to travel and do what I do and have friends all over the country and world, but none of them are here. And so I always go to get my cup refilled. We have
so much in common.
Yeah, I have the best friends on earth, but like, yo, I gotta go. And I get it. And starting some different communities have been really, really interesting now that we've got our facility here with the gym and everything. And man, leaning into that just really feels right, especially after getting to connect again at Fit for Service. Like I can't express like what a really strong weekend that was for me last year to get to be part of with you guys.
You just dropped in like you had been there the whole time.
Fuck, man. Well, look, I love everything. Look, I can't say enough really great things about Kyle and Aubrey and On It and how much that group has impacted my life. I don't know if I didn't get access through Kyle being a friend to being around Aubrey and those guys probably five or so years ago now, that I don't know how much more open I would have been to psychedelics as quickly. But because I got to be around them and I got to experience, like be close and not just catch the podcast or not just catch this, I got to see it work. Kyle and got to see it work in his relationship, and I got to see it in this home environment with their son. And then, you know, Aubrey at that point with Wit, like I got to see things operate, and I got to see that they're not fucking perfect. But there is some different understanding and love that they were operating with that I was not exposed to.
Yeah.
And so being around that was like, whatever this is, I don't find bitterness or jealousy or scarcity or any of these things. I really do find this open, warm, welcoming love for weirdness.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy for that. Like I love the freedom to be silly, man. Like I need it.
Right.
And dance and be a fucking goon.
Self-growth circles where it can get so serious, like your fucking plan and your thing and your meditation. Like it can people can get so wrapped up in this like insane, like head down devotion, like toward their higher self, that they forget like what they're even doing. Like, are you enjoying it? Is there joy in your life? Like, is there a moment that all of the healing and growth like takes you to any point where you can just stop for a second and like be silly and be funny and have a laugh? And And yeah, and they've shown that. You're so right. There's such a great combination of incredible knowledge and incredible implementation in their own lives of that knowledge, showing who they are, showing their weaknesses, showing where things, in Kyle and Aubrey, living not only in a lifestyle with a mixed family, with, polyamory, but living that in the public eye, as
Yo,
you yourself don't even know how you're going to feel. That's gotta, I mean, that's so brave,
right, to
and
be
it's,
public and say like I don't know that this is the right way,
yeah,
but I know that other path I'm not sold on, so I have to try.
it's
You know, and
amazing.
and what a fascinating thing that is, to just allow yourself the ability of like, maybe this fucks up, but that's all right.
Yep.
What do we learn from it?
That's what's so cool about this group, and I feel that the same way. And as younger people are kind of, I'm about to turn 40 in about a month, and I have an epic birthday party planned. It's
Hell
like
yeah.
I have East Forest coming, who's
Oh
just,
man.
I'm such a huge fan. I can't, as I say those words that come out of my mouth, it's just insane that he's coming to play a ceremony at my birthday party. But it's been a culmination of many things with his work and his music. But as I'm starting to train facilitators and starting to bring in other leaders that want to be in this space, um, I really have taken that model of complete vulnerability and honesty and transparency that I've seen from, I've been a fan of Aubrey since his little days when he's on Rogan and he's like, I got my human
Same.
optimization, remembering
Same.
him and watching him through this whole process. He has been, and all of them, but really Aubrey, because I think I connected with him the most and first. I don't have to be afraid, like for him going from this, 7 years of open relationship and polyamory and so much to like monogamy.
Yep.
That could be tough, man. That could be people being like, oh, well, looks like everything you did failed. And you were totally wrong this whole time. Like, and he was just like, here I am. Here's me in this new iteration of my life. And it gives people permission. And I think that it's something that I'm realizing after, I've been guiding retreats for about 7 years, but I've had my own company for 3 now. And each time, like the more radically vulnerable and open I am with what I am going through at that moment, it doesn't make me weak in the eyes of my guest. It doesn't make me like, oh God, is she going to be able to hold space for us? Like she just told us that she still struggles. She's still told us that psychedelics haven't cured her completely of all of her ailments. The more vulnerable I am, the more it gives people permission to get out of this idea that someday you're just going to arrive at a healed space. And someday you're just going to be the teacher and the healer, and you will have arrived. And only then can you teach others, and only then can you heal others. And that's been the definition of my journey, is like stepping forward to where I'm called when I'm so not ready, when I'm so financially not ready, when I'm physically not ready, when I'm like, I'm still struggling with, an eating disorder and body image and motivation. I'm still struggling with all of these things. Like, how am I being called forward to lead?
Yeah.
It's wild, but I think that's the beauty of the reluctant leader, right? Is that it's like something is still pulling you forward and you show up to it in the best of, the skills you've gathered. You have your community around you. You hopefully have mentors and people reflecting back to you, what needs to change or what isn't working, and people that you trust. And then you just step forward.
You know,
And so, yeah.
to me, and the leaders that I'm attracted to, like I need flawed anti-heroes.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Like I need people with some fucking scars, and I need people who've been able to take some damage, whether self-inflicted or not.
yep.
And like for me, seeing someone like I think Kyle's such a valuable person for this world and communicating about this type of medicine and healing and stuff, because he's such a savage. And so it's such an interesting thing to see it disarm guys of like, yeah, he's crying and being super vulnerable and he'll tear your face off.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like there's no way to be like, oh, Kyle's a pussy. Like that's not how this works. Like Kyle's is a beautiful, fucking incredible soul of a dude who's also a complete savage. And I love it. I love being around people like that are these outliers. And hearing you talk about that, right? Like those feelings, man, I need leaders with some imposter syndrome. I need to know that they're checking themselves.
Yeah. It's a
Because
balance, right? Because if you're not, and you're just like, oh, I'm 100% confident every day, I crush every day. I was like, that to me is just like is false bravado.
it's
You know,
false. It's
I've
super
never
hubris.
had a leader I liked that was just like, yeah, I've arrived, I crush it every day, my life's on point, I don't fucking everything's on everything. Like I have never, and I feel like that is to me is like the guru archetype, right? The guru is like the arrival, and now I teach, and I am in connection with the divine, and I give it to you,
Yep.
and that, you know, this is not meant to, of course, to like bash anyone culturally or if that's their devotion to the guru path, but I think that that archetype, like as that being the ultimate, is fading. You know, it really, I culturally.
I think we have too much access to people now.
Mm.
It's just too easy to have a global community that I don't have to deal with the 10 people from my hometown. I don't have to convince them that this is the route I want to go. I'll just go find other people that already dig this.
Yeah.
Um,
Not,
so like more jumping in. So now that you said that you've been facilitating trips or therapy, how would you say that so that I'm using the right?
um, I would call myself a psychedelic retreat leader,
Okay.
and yeah, and
What
facilitator.
what
That's what
do certifications? How does that work? How does one become that?
Ooh, that's a great question. As I am currently working on what that might look like. Like what does it look like to be? This is a question I've been asking myself for years. So to bring everybody up to speed, after that time in San Diego, I found myself, you know, for many years I was in the service industry. So bartending, mostly serving in restaurants, and that is a huge
Throwing
key in
parties, creating good times for people. Yeah, that's service industry.
community. And also, you know, if you're a good server in a restaurant, you are creating moments for people. You know, if you really have the heart to like feel and sense what is going to make each individual person, like not just the food and the wine or whatever's happening, but whatever's happening in that birthday or that date or whatever, like if you can be a facilitator to that experience. I've had experiences with people in restaurants where we're like crying at the end because it's so
For
beautiful, and we've,
sure.
absolutely, right? Like these are the moments. And so all of this, all of these things, I was in sales. I moved to Seattle and was working for Zillow for a few years and was doing a bunch of things with like sales and real estate agents, and all of these things seemed disconnected at the time. Right. So anyone out there who's in your like 20s or 30s who's like, I'm over here and then I was doing this job and like, why am
Fucking
I
good,
doing that?
dude. It
They
should be.
all seem connected, but like they're every single one of them started falling into place about 7 years ago. Like every single skill I had ever gathered was like, you need all of these things in order to do what you're going to do now. Every
But
single one of them.
that's such a really cool point that I want to stop on for a second because I've never thought about it that way, but I was the same way. Like I didn't have the single job path thing that I knew that I wanted to do. Out of college, I opened a bicycle shop that failed, and then I've bounced in strip clubs and worked a variety of jobs from outside sales in the petrochemicals industry for 10 years, did it the full life career of that before doing whatever the thing is now that's a combination of entrepreneur things that pay all my bills. I don't fucking understand how this is work, but here we are.
You
Uh,
do a lot of cool shit.
yeah, and I realized my skill was through outside sales. Like my skill is relationship building. My skill is being able to communicate. And so being able to facilitate that, like if that's somewhere I can push and I love doing it, what if I only had to talk to people that I'm interested in? Whereas like going on sales calls, you get it. It's fucking brutal.
It's brutal, but I don't
You
have
know,
to do that anymore. Neither do
no,
you. And now we do.
and I'm on the Gulf Coast, dude. Like I'm doing sales calls with it's 50-year-old guys who've worked at the refinery for 20 years who know nothing but 10 other dudes who work at the refinery, and like that's the life. That's the life. But like I specifically remember going to a lunch, and I don't remember what year this was. This must have been like 2015. And about the time like gay marriage got passed, and hearing someone like at the table with the group of guys I'm with, like, hearing these adult men talk about like, it's fine, but if you start coming around trying to turn my kids gay, and it was like, holy shit, you people exist.
Yeah.
And like it's me with 8 guys at a table who are sim to be similar thought on this. And like, I'm at work. This ain't my spot to fix these people. I'm just gonna shut the fuck up, get through the lunch, and move on with my life. Uh, but I just couldn't help it. I was like, yo, you're 50. How do you not know a gay person? Or I'm really sad that your gay friends can't be cool with you.
Right.
Because chances are you know a gay person.
The chances are pretty high. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's true. And like once I remember that even within my family and just certain people close to me, like that was always kind of the, I don't know anybody who's gay. Da, 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 da. And then you start looking and you're like, actually your close friends, your grandson, and they're like, well, no. And then of course, us growing up like where it was like comfortable. It's like, yeah, that's so true.
we
People
we
choose
we came
circle.
through a really interesting window of our. I think
Mhm.
I think the boomers get shit on a lot, no doubt about it, and I don't believe they do themselves a ton of favors. But I kind of recently, so I had a heavier mushroom trip last week and or 2 weeks ago, and some reason ended up on that, and I was thinking about it as like, what was their thing that got laid out for them, and it was this. They followed the standard path. Like their parents are the greatest generation. Like so, they're already a downgrade from that. Like, fuck
Yep.
are you guys doing? We did World War II. You guys went to Vietnam and everyone fucking hates you. Like, their parents came out of the war and came out of depression and had scarcity and all these type of things. And so that got built into the boomers that like, yo, you get a job, you follow that career, you fucking build the white picket fence, you build that house, you build that thing. And not only were they there, they went from being told exactly what to do with their life from their parents, uh, and then immediately made kids.
Yep.
There was never a window of self-discovery for that generation whatsoever. And then are expected to take care of the dying generation before them of their parents. And so I think their plight is very interesting. And it's something recently that I've thought about that like, oh man, you guys missed a big window. But because of kind of the transition of like, we'll have soldiers so that we can be farmers and we'll be farmers so our kids can be, teachers and we'll be teachers so our kids can be artists. Well, we're fucking here.
Yeah.
And we don't want to play by the same rules and we don't have to anymore. The world has changed. The pension
Huge.
thing's not there. None of the safety nets that our parents' generation had are there anymore. And so why would I go spend 30 years working for this job as this martyr for this greater good? Like, yo, I can buy my own fucking gold watch.
Yeah, there's nothing in it. And it's funny, like saying this, I think that my parents, they're, in their mid 70s. So they're like early, they missed, like they were having kids by the time even, hippies and psychedelics. And so like, even for where I'm at, it was only maybe a year ago after 7 years of doing this that my mom doesn't think I'm just like a Mexican drug lord or something. Like to her, it's just like drugs bad, drugs bad, drugs bad, except for what the doctor told me, right? So they had this also authority thing, like
I know. Same.
Doctor me drugs, they're good. Government says this, it's good, because that was what they grew up with. And I think what we see from them where they're like, blaming millennials and blaming all these generations, oh, they don't work hard enough and all these paradigms, if you just crack that, you could take a minute and a half to just crack that with them. I've done it with my dad where I was like, Dad, tell me about the first house, this beautiful 5-bedroom house close to the beach in Huntington Beach, California, right? Tell me about that house, the one that you bought. What were you doing? Oh, I was selling, he was like working for like Johnson & Johnson, selling door-to-door like medical supplies, like super easy. He was making like a decent living, right? Like
Sure.
Came home to his wife and kids every day, like great life. And his house at the time, he's like 23, 4 years old, he said it was about a year and a half of his like yearly income, right? So let's take that today. Let's say you make 80 grand today. You could buy a house by the beach with 4 bedrooms for all of your kids for what, $130,000? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Just so everyone knows, it still exists, and it's called the Midwest.
Right. Yeah. And even
one of the reasons I'm in St. Louis.
happening.
No, it's not quite as extreme for sure.
Having that, like building a life and being like, if you just work here for 1 year at this company that gives you, we don't overwork you, and we're really like amazing, and you can just buy a house for your family. You can have college for them, all of them. You can have 4 or 5 or 6 kids, however many you want. I mean, like that was what they grew up in. So I think but it's almost, I also think that because they didn't have that time, right, between becoming an adult and having children, they didn't have this beautiful time that we have of self-discovery. So that is misunderstood, and they don't even have the tools to understand that what they're feeling is a little bit of jealousy of that. Like, I can see it in my
Sure.
parents, like, oh, well, we had, I didn't have time to just hippie gallivant around the world and find
Scarcity,
myself.
scarcity,
I had
scarcity,
to work,
dude.
scarcity, right? And my dad would say that to me growing up. Like, in the summer, I remember a distinct memory in high school, like me and my girlfriend over the summer would just like, I had a 1965 red Mustang that it was so beautiful.
Hell yeah.
And we would drive down to the beach and listen to Sublime and like, do whatever and look at boys and go to the beach. And it was so fun. The summers were so fun in high school. And I remember my dad saying to me one day in summertime, Amanda, life is not just one big long Saturday. And I looked at my friend and I
Disagree.
was like, that's exactly what it is. Life is
Disagree.
one big long Saturday, right?
No, what
Because
the
he
thing
would,
is, Saturday doesn't exist. Saturday is a fucking construct that we've come up with.
I know. Isn't that
Fuck.
funny? But to him, it was like the one day you could be free. That's it.
You're
And like, I
allowed.
was too free. I was being way too free. I was having way too much fun. And my nose wasn't to the grindstone enough. Even though I was like, 15, 16 years old. I was like, I'm a
Right.
baby. Who cares? Right. And I
Not
still
always
had a
gonna
job.
be fun and games.
I still was at a smoothie shop. I'm like, I work already. Like, give it a break.
Meanwhile,
So,
now you've transitioned into this is a living.
oh my
And
gosh. It's so funny to see it through their perspective,
yeah, and man, it's now have your parents taken into any of it? Have they given a go?
Well, gosh, no. As far as like actually, no way. But I wanna like bring everybody up to speed of like how in the hell I even got to the place I am now, because it's really fascinating. So once I kind of left the church, I moved out of San Diego. I moved to Seattle for a while. I was doing some stand-up comedy there and some sketch comedy. And then from Seattle, I had had a dream for many years to move to New York City. In my head, New York City was like the ultimate place where everything was happening and all of the energy and all the creativity. It was too bad that I was kind of envisioning, New York in like the 80s and 90s and not New York in the, 2010s,
Yeah.
which it was more just like Victoria's Secret and like you had to be making like $300,000 to even live anywhere near the lifestyle that I was like thinking I was going to live in New York.
Sure, right.
I was like, no, I'll be fine. Like, Seattle's expensive too. Like, it's fine. Like, I'll figure it out. So I saved up a bunch of money at my sales job in Seattle, saved up like 30 grand, which is like more money than I ever had in my life. And I was like, I'm just going to go to New York. I'm going to like not work for a while. I'm going to take improv classes at the best improv school. And I'm going to really pursue this like entertainment comedy path, right? Up to this point, it had just been a hobby that I really enjoyed. And also, again, community, right? Like comedy was the same thing. So I get to New York and within a year or so, just really fall into the deepest depression of my life. Like,
Damn.
drinking way too much. Like everything becomes a numbing device there, like sex, food, alcohol, like everything just becomes this way to escape. And the city's so fast paced that everyone's kind of doing that, or at least in my circle, not everyone, but you can, right? You can just run from escape to escape and everyone's too busy to pay attention. And you're too busy to pay attention.
Oh, yeah, you could easily have 5 groups of friends that don't know each other.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. If they live more than 3 streets away, it's like, I don't even know you. I'm never going to see you, And so, and that was when I didn't have the church. I had been an atheist for like 9 years at this point, like full on materialist atheist, like totally thought spirituality was nonsense, crystals, all that stuff I thought was like absolute nonsense. And it was the weakest minded people that had any religion or spirituality whatsoever. I almost even looked down upon spirituality even more than religion.
Yeah, I had a heavy atheist window as well. Both Bonnie and I did. Yeah, we're just like, none of this fucking works.
Yeah. I was into crystals.
Pretty comfortable.
Yeah. It made sense. And it made sense at the time because you could see how religion was a construct of control and it made sense. It made sense for humans to try to gather the secrets they wanted and keep people in control. It made sense. And so to me,
I think it served a ton of purpose for a period of time. And I think I think I don't believe the intent of starting writings of the books, any of those type of things. I don't believe that intent was built on control.
No, I
Um,
don't.
I do believe the way you want to translate that philosophy, which I wish it was approached as philosophy and not some type of fucking textbook. Um, I feel better about things, but like I think we needed that for a long time. We needed that structure through the dark ages. Like it's easy now to be like, what the fuck does all this do? Like things are sweet. Like
I know.
we're not we don't have to explain some type of flood or locust or why the sun is is red tonight because of some eclipse. Like we just don't have enough information. We have to explain some shit with fuckery. Um and yeah, it's crazy to me, but yeah, it's funny that both of us had the atheist thing. Like that felt far more comfortable to me
Mm,
than the amount of hypocrisy that I could find in the rationale that was Christianity.
yeah.
Um, I just simply for me was like I can't have a deity that is all knowing, omnipotent, all powerful, but babies drown.
Yeah.
Right? So are you telling me this thing can't change it? Could not save that kid's life if he wanted to? Or are you saying he doesn't want to?
Mm,
Because one of those makes you an asshole, the other one makes you not powerful.
yeah.
And I'm not interested in praying to either of those people.
Mm.
Um,
Third strange option is like, and just watches and enjoys it.
is
Like,
indifferent. At best, is indifferent.
mm-hmm.
And I'm not into that one either. Like, there's very little proof of the Old Testament that God's really into us. Like, there's a lot
Right.
of book there that he's not the
Yeah.
fucking good. He's not the hero of this story.
No. And he has, not only does he have human qualities, but he has the lowest of the human qualities. I think this used to drive me the most crazy about the Old Testament is like, our God is a jealous God. And I was like, really? So like of all the human attributes, like he's only evolved as far as jealousy,
Jealousy and scarcity.
pretty fucking low.
I
Like,
have this great place you can come, and you can come here forever, and it'll be lovely, and it'll be full of love, and you're welcome to it. I just need you to say you love me first. But if you don't, totally cool. You just burn forever.
forever.
Like, what the fuck do you mean?
Yeah. I had a conversation one time I remember with my mom about like my niece. Like my niece was just, they were super, super close growing up. Like, and I said, okay, it was just out of nowhere. This was in my parents probably remember my Amanda atheist phase where I was just like throwing things at them all the time and they would get so frustrated. But I was like, okay, let's say McKenna does something really, really, really bad to you. Like she just becomes this terrible teenager and she burns your house down, right? Like something so horrible. I was like, is there anything she could do to you where you would decide that the punishment is burning alive forever? Like, is there anything, right? And I was like, and you are a flawed human who maybe, maybe you're like, okay, maybe if she did this or this, like maybe, right? But then we have this omnipotent, all-loving, like the core definition of love is like burning forever.
Yeah.
So there was so many things. It's like, it's so fun to tap back into that mind space because I mean, I was a part of a meetup group in San Diego called the San Diego New Atheists. Like that was a huge time, like Sam Harris
So
and
another
Chris Hitchens
community.
and Richard Dawkins. And like, I was so deep into that philosophy because it seemed, from their point of view that if we didn't intervene on the part of where religion was going, that it was going to be, the death of, it was going to be an existential crisis. And so it seemed very important to be a part of that atheist movement, and like science and rationality only and materialism. And it was great. I'm glad I had that time in my life to understand where I'm at now, which is, fuck am I now?
Very different. Very, very different, I'm sure. Yeah, I
Different.
mean, so there's your question now.
Yeah.
How do you define God now?
So here's where I went. So I'm keeping my eye. Let's see. I'm keeping my eye on the time. I don't want to take up too much of your time. But,
I have plenty.
So the mythology of Amanda is like, I'm in New York City, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm judgmental. Everywhere I go, I just hate everybody. I'm like, fuck that guy, fuck that girl's skirt, that guy's stupid. Why did she smile like that? Like, I was just this pool of total anger all the time. And I didn't have any access to any sort of like spiritual tools to realize like, maybe this is just a projection of my own self.
Fuck, man. Yeah.
No, it was that guy's a dumbass, and why did that person park like that? Like, it was all external. And I was miserable. Coincidentally, at the same time, I had seen DMT, the spirit molecule. So that was a documentary. I think it was on Netflix at the time, or what did we have back in the day? I'm like, I don't even know if it was before Netflix, but you know, I saw this documentary that was about ayahuasca, about DMT, and I started just getting fascinated by ayahuasca and going deep. Like, I think Blue Morpho, which was Hamilton Souther's first documentary, it's on YouTube, about his time in the jungle, and it's these people barfing and screaming and, you know, sounds of demons and like shamans, and it just fascinated me. I thought it was nonsense. I thought it was absolute. I was like, this is some bullshit. Like, you know, maybe to the indigenous people, like, they think what they're doing is healing, but like, I was like, who are these
It's
people?
not, they're on drugs. It's easy for me to be like, they're on drugs.
Yeah, like, people are on drugs in the jungle barfing.
Yeah.
But I couldn't stop. Like, I would stay up at night and like wait until my roommate had gone to bed and just like infinitely start watching like infinite YouTube videos and Googling all about ayahuasca. Like, it had taken a hold of me. And my dominant thought was like, oh, this is like for severely mentally ill people, severe, you know, suicidal people. But like, I had no clue that it was for me until one day I woke up, and all I can remember is I felt this call inside of me, and it sounded like it's your turn. You're going. And again, at this time, I had no connection to spirit, to voices. So the fact that I heard this, and I mean, I heard it pretty clearly. Like, I guess.
Are you still using psilocybin during this strep?
No.
Okay, so you abandoned.
Like 22, and here I'm about like 32. No psychedelics.
Okay.
Only, I mean, probably like still weed, you know, like smoking weed and drinking alcohol.
But, yeah, but you're not doing it for connection, or you're doing it for disconnect.
Yeah, all for numbing. Yeah, all for numbing and disconnect. Yeah, for sure. And so I start doing research and finding a place, and I found a place in Ecuador. I was like, I didn't want to go to Peru for some reason where I didn't feel like it was as protected there. So I found out in Ecuador that you actually, like, all of the tribes and the shamans have to be registered as like an official healer there. So they have kind of like a way of vetting shamans. You can't just call yourself a shaman and be like, hey, here, drink this. So I found a place.
That's a plus, because there's a bit mystery there.
You just put out a little shaman sign in the front of your jungle, and you're like, yeah, this happens everywhere. Ecuador, not so much. So I go to Ecuador. I had to have my best friend literally push the button to book my flight because I was that scared. I was so terrified to go this way. I was so scared because I knew something was coming. And I had a talk with her, you know, I was like, this, you know, I've been kind of feeling not myself. And the distinct feeling I remember having at this time that I've told people about, I think they resonate with now, guests that I have, was that at this age, I think it was about 33 years old. I said, I was convinced that every day of my life was going to be worse than the last. For sure. All downhill. Like, I was like, well, good thing I had fun in my 20s. It's all downhill from here. Life is shitty. I'm just going to be angry and pissed.
You're going to ride that out for 60 fucking years? Yes. Like, that's it? We're going to ride the clock out on tomorrow's worst for 60 years? Like, nah, dude.
And what's funny is, like, when you're in that hopeless state, you're also attracting in that energy. So all you see are other hopeless people, like the hopeless guy making my sandwich at the deli, and the hopeless, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, oh yeah, yep. There's a 40-year-old hopeless person. There's a 60-year-old hopeless person. And that will be me. For real. I don't even, I mean, it's hard to imagine not even it's hard to remember being in that place, but I was in that place for sure. So
and not only that, but submitting to it.
Yeah.
But like submitting to that place of like, this is it. Like finding I don't want to call it comfort there, but acceptance that like, this is the plight. Why am I trying? It
was sad. And this is where I look back. There was a higher consciousness leading me through all of this, because I wasn't leading myself there. I wasn't like, I'm going to go to Ecuador and I'm going to put in my best effort to heal. Like, I didn't even have that hope. I wasn't even, I don't even, it's so hard to imagine how I even got there, but I knew that I needed to do this. And at this time, when I was going, I was signed up for a 12-day retreat, super intensive. It was 5
Whoa.
ceremonies. Yeah, it was a lot. So it was 3 ayahuasca, 2 wachuma, and then a sweat lodge. That was an 8-hour sweat lodge with ayahuasca and San Pedro. It's the crazy.
Hoo-wee. Well,
Yeah.
that's a baptism by fire.
Yeah.
Now, like, man, so my first experience with ayahuasca was down at Rhythmia in Costa Rica, and was a really incredible experience. I'm called to go back. It's finding the week of time in my life that I can disappear currently. So I may need to find some shorter retreats that I don't need 4 days in a row to do currently. That was a lot. It was a lot to do it 4 days in a row, dude. Especially, I got nothing my first 2 nights.
Wow. That's so
and
fun.
and was super bummed. And like I've never been that disappointed because I was just so bitter about it. Like I've built this experience up to this big fucking challenge. Like let's go. I'm ready for it. I'm leaning in. And fucking nada. And of course nada. Because what I wanted was 8 hours of DMT.
Right.
I just wanted off the planet for 8 hours.
Mm.
And that is not what it decided to provide.
Like sitting in that disappointment. I've seen a lot of it tends to, in my experience, coming to like eventually working at this retreat center, I probably sat with like over 400 people. And it seems to be that the ones who don't have that experience the first 1 or 2 times, the really common thread throughout their entire journey is like sitting with disappointment and not being in control and just being like and demanding, like, I wanted this, I paid for this, I was gonna get this, how dare you, and ayahuasca, she's a feminine spirit. And the way she was described to me through the shamans was like, she is like a woman, right? Like, maybe I don't like you. Like, maybe I don't want to be with you, like do something better. Because
Yeah.
I'm not just show up and like, whereas like San Pedro, that's masculine, is like, he's here to party. Like you drink the cactus and he's like, hello. Like, there's
Oh, really? See, I don't have any experience with San Pedro yet.
you don't really get hardly, I'd say 1 in hundreds of people say like, I didn't feel it. Like you always feel it there, it's present, it's masculine, it's authoritative. And the way that they said that those medicines work together in the context of this retreat was that ayahuasca shows you how you need to change. And then San Pedro helps you decide.
Okay.
Like, I'm done, right? Like I'm done with this.
Th-
And to go back to that first,
Yeah. How was that? How was your first experience?
at that time, I was still had so many masks on that I wasn't even aware of what I was trying to say to my group about why I was there. I had made up this kind of story of like, oh, I just want to be more creative and I want to do more comedy. And I've just been kind of like down in the dumps. I wasn't able to access yet at that point what was really at the core. That's what I was there searching for. So what I found at the core, at least, the first layer of the onion, now looking back, that I needed to see during that
Yeah.
retreat, came to me during an extremely powerful San Pedro ceremony. So the San Pedro ceremonies were 14 to 20 hours. They were crazy long, sunrise to sunset, and then deeper on into the night sometimes. And the way that they were run there was that there were about 20 people, I think, in my group. And our San Pedro shaman's named Santiago. He's the guardian of the largest San Pedro cactus forest in all of Ecuador. Super respected in the community, has been on the path for many years, has a lot of humor, like understands the Western mind, also spent some time in the US, but like, is indigenous and grew up in the jungle. So he has like both of those worlds. So we all had the chance to sit in front of the fire and sit on a jaguar skin. So it was an actual skin of a real jaguar that had been given to him as he was on his shamanic path. And each person got a chance to sit there, ask a question or tell a story or just receive a healing. You really didn't know what it was going to be, but it's kind of terrifying to sit in front of 20 people and sit in front of this shaman who's like staring you in the eyes, and like, what's going to come out? So I walk up to, it's my turn, and I was very confident. I was like feeling the medicine a lot. It's a very heart opening medicine. And to me, it's like a truth serum. That's the way I love San Pedro cactus. I ended up working so many ceremonies after this, but it's just, you think you're gonna, someone asks you a question, you think you're gonna give them maybe the typical answer, and then like bleh, what comes out of your mouth is just the truth.
Oh,
It's
shit.
fantastic. It's kind of, which if you're scared of vulnerability, you're gonna have a hard time, because
All right.
man, it's like
More for
you're
it.
just fully seen. You're fully seen by
And
all, and everyone's awake and aware.
do you now host San Pedro retreats as well?
No, I don't, but I feel like that medicine may be coming back into my life, because
Okay.
I have the cactus on my arm here. Like I love them so much. And so I'm walking up to this mat, and in my head I'm like, I'm gonna sit in front of this fire, and I'm gonna look into the fire, and I'm gonna ask, when am I gonna meet my husband? Like that's what I want to know. Like I was treating this like it was a fortune teller.
Sure. Like fucking magic 8 ball.
Like, let me look into the fire. I didn't understand, I was so young at this point. And I was like, why not? Why not ask that? So I sit down on the carpet. I'm feeling all of the energy of this jaguar and the fire. It's so intense. At this point, I have no skills of how to like breathe or even translate this energy in my body. It's just overwhelming. And he looks at me, and I'll never forget this. He looks at me without me saying a word, and he says, "Why do you hate yourself?"
Shit. Fuck, man. Maybe like, what's your favorite color? Something easier to start with. Favorite food?
I mean, that's like the story of my life. Like if my soul was coming into this body, it's going to be like, okay, your name's going to be Amanda. You're born here, and you're going to be on a quest to discover why you hate yourself so much.
Fuck, man.
And yeah, man. And then and so it just hit me. I couldn't even speak. It just hit me so deeply that was what was at the core of all of these symptoms of anxiety and symptoms of depression and judgment. Was like, it was all about me hating who I am, and being in complete denial of everything
Yeah.
about myself. And so he then looks around the whole circle, and he's like, look into the eyes of all of these people. And all of the people, every single one of them started staring at me. And then they all said at once, "We love you, Amanda.
Oh.
We love you." And I was like, I thought I was going to shrivel and die.
Yeah, that's a lot too.
It was a lot.
Yeah,
lot.
it's crazy that when you're in that own place, like you can't even take love.
Oh no, and I couldn't take love from that many people, but I really do remember in that moment making the decision, right, with that masculine energy. Sorry, my dog's squeaking a toy over there.
Good. That's good.
Yeah, making a decision to be like, I'm gonna make this my path. I'm gonna find out what it means, what it even means to love yourself, what that even means to discover that. And it's taken many ceremonies, many ups and downs, like falling back into that. But I really look back at that as like a turning point of leaving behind that deep self-hatred that just became so insular and selfish, right? And I see that now when I'm around people that have deep self-hatred, like it's like, whoa, you're so wrapped up in this, as if someone who's super confident and loves themselves too much, right? Like a little bit narcissistic, and someone who hates themselves, it's both the ego. It's both the ego saying how special you are, like, oh, I'm so despicable, right? It's the same. It's the same. Right. It's being wrapped up in that story completely.
I think it's interesting, like the amount of anchors. Like it's one of those things like I just consider drag on the system. Like these anchors that we'll bring with us into the future of our past, these things that we've identified with, whether that's trauma, whether it's family, whether it's the religious thing we grew up with, or bad luck, or I can't get this done, or whoever I am, these identifiers, whether it's this previous athlete who got hurt for me, any of these type of things that I feel like need to come with me so that when I introduce myself, all this. Meanwhile, why am I so fixated on trying to bring to this new relationship, which we're having in this moment of meeting? Like, why would I need to bring all that with us? Like, where we're going doesn't have use for a rearview mirror. Mm. And so if we're starting from this clean slate and we have a chance letting go of all of these things that you've identified as and realize you're not those things, they're things you did. And not only that, like I'm not in competition with my previous ghost.
Yep.
Those are chapters, and I'm stoked that guy did what he did, but now I'm doing other stuff. I see that, and I see people super scared to let go of those things that, I mean, Look
Super
at
scared.
look at people's need to be part of a community, right? Like that's what professional sports are. That's why there's fans of it. Like you don't have anything in common with these people on the field competing in this thing. You grew up in a town and you're like, that's our colors. I'm wearing
Yeah.
that one. Like what an interesting thing that you don't have any bearing on whatsoever, that you've given controls to your emotions. Like
And that's
I'm
such
gonna
a
let a
simple.
bunch of 20-year-olds play a fucking game on the weekend that messes up my week of how it goes. Like I wouldn't let these people dog sit for me. Like fuck would I let them?
We are as humans, right? Like I just thought this. It's so funny that you bring this up. I just thought this the other day. I don't know why. I was looking up at the sky and I was just thinking about aliens, and
Perfect.
I'm imagining the way that I just the humor of my brain works is I imagine the aliens getting here and just being like, oh, you guys are still doing colors, like blue, red, black skin. Like you guys are still on colors. Like
Dude,
literally the surface thing that we can see is like your color, I'm a red color and you're a blue color, right? Like it actually gives me so much compassion for humans of like where we are. Like we're
of course.
such babies in evolution when we still are like, well, my team has this flag and your team,
Yeah.
and like these surface ideas that are just have no depth to them at all.
We're a planet that has developed world-ending weapons that are only pointed back at us.
Yeah.
Like what a fucking weird, like we're cruising through the galaxy just doing this the whole time. Like fucking weird. And I feel the same way. I've had that moment too, looking at the sky thinking about aliens. And like if aliens do show up or if they're watching, like someone's got to report and go, oh, they don't even speak the same language yet.
Right.
They can't even all fucking talk.
They haven't even learned to share resources. This was in conversations with God.
Right.
Like they haven't even when he's asking like how far is humanity along the evolutionary scale toward these like higher evolved beings, and this God figure in the book who's kind of answering him was like, oh, you haven't even learned to share resources yet, right? Which is like the first thing we teach children, like share your sandwich,
Yeah.
share your toy. Like we haven't even learned that yet. So it's amazing the advancements, quote unquote, that we've made when like we're still such simple beings.
Such simple beings.
We're
And
so simple.
I can't help but like laugh now. Like I really enjoy the idea of the simulation. Because whether it is or not, it doesn't really matter. But I love it, and so I do love the idea of like if this is a simulation and it's running and someone's running it a bunch of different times to see like what possible outcomes come for humanity. Like I hope that there's one that's like, well, they found plastic again, and they're fucked. Like no matter what the path is, at some point
They
we
found
figure out
that,
plastic.
they found that glider again. Looks like they're just gonna open up black holes left and right until they destroy themselves.
Right,
It's
like, and
okay.
I wonder at like what point, like the guy watching the simulation realizes like, oh, this is the path to plastic. Fuck.
Right.
Like if this will put up, they're gonna dump all this shit in the sea. They're not gonna figure out how to do it. I'm just curious when they figure out that okay, this was great for a while. We need another plan.
And will we? And I mean, that's what's so fun about being alive at this time. So this is something that one of the medicine women I worked with told me, and I really like this as a, I don't know if this is necessarily capital T truth, but I like this as an idea. So she was mentioning one time that she's like, look at the 1900s, right? Leading up to the 1900s, 1800s, 1900s, there was about 1 billion people on this planet. Here we are 100 years later, and we have 9 billion people, right? And she was like, from my understanding of the astral world and like the many dimensions, the reason there has been that insane population growth in this time is because souls want to be here to watch what's going to happen. They want to watch humanity awaken, or be at that time like, will they or won't they? Will they or won't they? Right? I felt that in that moment. And she's like, she was kind of the generation previous to us that were like on this in this group, and she was like, I really think that you guys, this is probably like 4 years ago, she's like, I really think that it's going to be your generation that witnesses this and has to make some of these existential decisions, truly. And she's like, I know every generation says that and every generation faces their existential crises, but this one is global, right? This one is so connected. It's so hyper connected. It's so divided. And I remember at that time being like, oh, maybe not, but now these past 2 years, it's like, oh, okay, maybe you were right. And maybe we are here to witness that, in our infinite capacity as souls. Like, she's like, I've seen other timelines and I've seen how, people that are out in the ether, like all of these souls were like, you were on earth during that time. Like, you got to see it, right? Like, it was exciting. Like, oh, you got to see when the humans actually like decided to evolve and decided to transcend this scarcity and all of that. Like, wow. So it was such a beautiful way to, what a beautiful way to look at it, right? That all of us came here, like we all wanted to be born because we got really excited to witness it, realizing that in our infinite capacity that it doesn't really matter, right? Like, being outside matter, like nothing matters when there is no matter, but we're in the game, we're in the game where it does matter. And like you said, like, it's so fascinating that when I was super hopeless and depressed, that somehow I still envisioned myself living until I was like 70 or 80 years old. Like, I didn't kill myself, right? Like, I still had such a survival instinct, even in that mindset.
During that time of depression, were you using any other like medication to try to deal with it or anything like that?
No. And, without going too deep into it, I grew up with a sister who has a pretty severe case of bipolar. And so she had been on medication since she was like 13. And I really have seen the way that, Prozac, lithium, like, every time a new thing came out, the doctors were like, take this, I don't know, whatever. And start to see the long-term consequences of that in her. And, there was a piece of me that distrusted the pharmaceutical industry from like the get-go, and I was always like, yeah, I'll take like an ibuprofen here and there, but unless it's like I'm desperate and I'm super sick, maybe I'll take antibiotics. So like, I was just always kind of in that.
Yeah, I'm glad for the pharmaceutical company. Magic drugs are incredible. I'm glad that we have the availability of those. I'm really sad that we didn't, as a species, say, let's look at anything that possibly helps. But money, greed, and humans and scarcity get involved and things get weird. We're very interesting species.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I cover a few things with you.
Yeah, for sure. We haven't even talked about like the fucking mushroom retreats yet, but that's okay.
Dude, I know, right? So like, if someone's called to this, right? Like, so I'm called to this. I want to go do a therapeutic mushroom retreat with you. What does that look like? How do I schedule it? How do I book it? What does that look like?
So the way that the Buena Vida, which is the name of my company, the Buena Vida Psilocybin Retreats, the way that it was born, just to give like a tiny little backstory, was I was working in Ecuador. I found a lot of healing in my own retreat. I ended up coming back as a volunteer. Then I came back as the general manager, and I was running the retreats. I wasn't running the ceremonies, but I was running the retreats themselves. So the orientation, integration.
At the place that you did your experience. Yeah. So you got called enough that you're like, yo, I'm coming back, and you guys probably need to figure out how to put me on the payroll.
I was living in community. I was, it was a perfect timing. Like, someone was leaving and I came in as the manager. And that was, again, where I got to use all of my community organization skills, all of my sales, all of my leadership skills, and also was given the opportunity, like, hey, you want to teach a class? Do you want to, teach meditation? Do you want to do all these things? So I was given an audience of constant, 25 people coming every few weeks into this space. And then also, because I was there a long time, the shamans started to trust me. And then I became a fire keeper for ayahuasca. And then I became a gatekeeper for San Pedro. So I was also learning their traditions and learning about ceremony and ritual and about the fire and had their connection. So slowly was starting to be brought into the training of how to be in leadership and ceremony. So my very last ayahuasca journey, I was getting toward the end of my 3rd year there, and I was like, something else has to happen. I'm like 36 years old. I have no money. I have like $500 in the bank. I'm basically volunteering. I was like, by the time I'm 40, I really want to have something together where I can take care of myself and I'm on a path that I can see that makes sense for me. So I go into an ayahuasca journey. At this point, honestly, in 3 years, I probably only drank ayahuasca like 8 times. Like, she had to drag me kicking and screaming because she's so powerful. And I waited until she like yanked me out of my bed and said, get your ass in ceremony.
Yeah.
So I end up having, I really, because it's just, she's so intense. So I'm in ceremony, And I have the most beautiful journey of my life where she basically comes to me in the beginning and says, ask me anything you want. I'm here for you. I'm here to meet you in this. She takes me to my future wedding. She takes me to like so many different things that are just incredible. And then at one point, I'm just kind of sitting there. It's been like a just intense journey. And I hear as clear as day as I'm telling you, oh, by the way, you're going to move to Mexico and you're giving people mushrooms.
Fucking hey. All right. Here we go. Dad, big download.
Okay. No instructions, no other details, nothing. So I wake up the next day with this very like, and a bunch of other homework, like call your uncle, do all these, like so much homework, right?
Yeah.
But that was clear. And I was like, okay, I haven't taken mushrooms in like 12 years. I don't live in Mexico. I haven't been to Mexico in 10 years.
Right.
I had $500 in my bank account. Like, what are you talking about? But the idea was so rich within me that it was like, this has to happen. And the way that it fell into line was just like fucking clockwork. Like I looked up, I'm like, where would I go? Maybe I'll go to like Tulum or Playa del Carmen. That looks pretty. I wonder if there's a retreat center there. Bing, bing, bing. Find the first place. It was an ashram in the jungle. They're like, hey, we're offering retreats now. And you can just like book a retreat and host your own retreat here. I email them. They're like, it's $1,000 deposit. Like first place, everything was going like this. Like it was just, it was in such a place of creation of magic of like, what does the website look like? Like, it was all from fun and joy. And I had no business plan. I had no intention of understanding how it was going to work, but it was just happening. It was happening through me.
Well, you can always figure that shit out, but you have to start taking action. Like so many people just get stuck in the paralysis through analysis before you ever take that first step. And then it's easy to just be like, oh, I just can't, because you're busy looking at step 200.
Yeah.
Like just do step one, dude.
Have like, well, I have to have 10,000 followers before I have this, before I have a marketing plan, no. I literally went on Squarespace. I'm like, what's the cheapest website? Okay, it's $10 a month. Great. Plug and play. Here's some information. Click a button, set up a PayPal. Like I seriously just went bare bones on all of it. And I was like, at this point, I was like, I have no mushrooms. I don't know who's going to come to this thing, but I'm just putting it 6 months out from now. I took out $500 on a credit card. I was like, I hope fucking someone comes to this thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like unknown girl who's like, come to the jungle and take mushrooms with me. And our very first retreat in January of 2019.
I'm sure lots of men have fallen for that. Like that story, I'm willing to bet has begun a good path for many of people. Come to the jungle and do mushrooms with me. Absolutely.
Exactly. And 20 people came to our first
Wow,
retreat.
dude.
It's more than we've ever had because that was a lot. 20 was a lot.
20's a lot. So how many helpers did you have?
Well, I had a shaman at the time named Kate, who I worked with for a year. And then I think we had 5 facilitators.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. I felt really confident running the retreat itself, the orientation, like the workshops, and then it had the ceremony just over to Kate, who had been working with a Shipibo for a few years and had worked with mushrooms her entire life, was really on the ayahuasca path, but was just a beautiful space holder and musician, and it was gorgeous. And the very first woman to ever sign up, her name's Marguerite, like she would love a shout out, I had worked with her in Jamaica at a different mushroom retreat called Myco Meditations. And I'll never forget the like $1,500. I see it in my PayPal and it's like, $1,500 was like 10 million to me at this time.
Dude,
she just wrote me and she's like,
I know. I fucking know.
$500,
Yeah.
And she said, anything you do, I'll come to. I trust you. I love you. Like, I'm coming. And it was that spark of faith. It was that seed that just like, and then from there, every other person, I had never met them in my life. They weren't friends or family. They were people who, to this day, I ask, how did you find me? They're like, I don't know. I was just like on the internet, and then I went here and there, and I saw you, and I saw your picture, and I just thought, wow, I'll do this. So that trust, and like, and ayahuasca told me that too. And I always do this to this day. And this is like a woo-woo side of me, but it's fucking worked. Is that she explained, like the nature of the internet is the exact same as the nature of the mycelium network, as a cell, as everything, right? As above, so below. So she was like, when you're going to like physically put your hands on your computer to write an email or to write a piece of content for your website or to send a payment or do anything, like know that energy is calling in those that are supposed to work with you, and like use the internet not, oh, this is spiritual, but this is like my marketing internet time. Like, no, it's all spirit. And so those people will feel that. And to this day, they're like, I just liked your video, or I just saw your picture. I just trusted you. I don't know what it was. I don't know what you said. It was your energy. It was your
Fucking
energy that
intent, dude. It's energy. It's intent. You're putting it out there as a healer. You're not trying to pull. You're not trying to take. You're staying on give, and it's obvious.
yeah. And that has kept it, we shut down like 2 retreats when COVID first sprung up in 2020. But by June of 2020, we were like back and going again, because we just had people. And I have such a heart for people who are so vulnerable and admit to me, they're like, this is my last hope. I've done
Yeah.
everything. I've taken all of the pills. I've done all of the therapy, and I need to come to this. And during COVID, they were like, so I get COVID. Who cares? I'm on the verge of like wanting to die anyway. That's
Yeah.
where people come to a lot of times to these retreats. They really do.
It is. It is
And
for
it's
sure. It's a last ditch effort. Especially for Western culture. Or for our culture of like, fuck, man. I'll try jungle juice
yeah,
or whatever it is.
alternative, like this extreme alternative, therapy.
So how
But
many
yeah,
days are your retreats?
they're either 5 or 7. So our classic retreat has always been 7, but we've started offering 5 just for, people who maybe can't take as much time off. And so in the 5-day retreats, we do 2 ceremonies, and in the 7, we do 3.
Okay.
They're both extremely effective. My philosophy is that it must be held in a holistic container. So we do breath work, ecstatic dance.
Dude, I love it.
There's self-hypnosis, there's journaling, there's artwork. Like there's so many tools other than just like, okay, take mushrooms the rest of your life and you'll be fine.
Fuck, man, I need to get down there. I've never done like a mushroom experience. The only thing I have any reference to is ayahuasca with a group setting. I've done plenty of mushrooms, but I haven't done it. And I've done plenty of mushrooms for like personal therapy. Like I love it because like when shit was south with me and I was in pain and dealing with the chronic pain from my knee and those type of things in that window of my life, going to therapy, like with a therapist, I struggled with.
Like talk therapy.
Not that I'm not vulnerable. The problem is my skill of being able to communicate my idea is really good. And I can possibly win.
Yeah.
And I know that that's not how therapy is supposed to work, but I'm a fucking lunatic, and that's how it goes. As a kid, it's the same thing. As a kid, it's like, why, how is this, right? Or if I can just explain why I did this, you'll get it. And that has never changed. And so therapy in that route doesn't work. Whereas psychedelics for me have allowed, I'm the facilitator of that therapy, and that guy doesn't tolerate my bullshit. He can't hear it, and he sees all the tricks. He's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? You're not tricking me. You can't lie to me. And that's what it's allowed for me. Now, I'm super interested in doing a more organized mushroom experience, and
I'd love you to come down. Oh my gosh.
Bonnie and I would love to, and to help and speak or do anything we can to talk. Let's talk more. Let's figure it out.
I think what you would enjoy, and what I'm hearing, and I would love to like say this directly to you, is that has been like a really core principle and philosophy that I personally think, not only in this work, but I see it happening on the entire planet, is that is the rise of the feminine, right? The rise of the feminine spirit. And many men, especially, I notice, come to the retreat, and what they eventually end up saying or telling me is like, I looked at a bunch of different retreats. I looked at these other ones, and I wanted to come to a place that was mainly women in leadership. And I work with men too. Like I have men on my team, but it's female led, and it's led in the way, also, even the men I work with, it's led in the way of the feminine. And the way of the feminine when it comes to healing is not hit you over the head with 8 grams, blow your brains out, like send you off into space, figure it out yourself, pussy, in the dark, no music, no nothing, right? And people come that way. They're like, I want ego death, I want this, I want to, I want to get my mind.
You get to choose, motherfucker. That ain't how this works. This is no, you can choose your own adventure. You do not get to pick your destination. Get fucked on that idea.
Yeah. And especially people like, by the way, when you experience ego death, I just need to let you know, it comes back. I think people think like it's gone forever. I was like, no, it's just for that time.
No, it's fresh powder laid down. It's fresh
Some
powder. Now, whatever you want to do after it's the powder's there again, you can carve your own tracks back in.
So I think what a lot of people who come with that mentality of like, I'm going to blow my brain out, I want to do this and that, is like they see is like we do things in a way that is allows your nervous system and your whole body to like relax into the idea that you can be held, that you can be cared for, that you can be, that there can be sweetness, and like you don't have to figure it all out right now, and like one piece at a time is fine. And it's the way of the divine mother. I mean, a lot of people, I don't have children myself, but I really consider myself mothering in the sense that you know, I kind of in the retreats like become what we all wanted in a mother, what we all needed in a mother, which was just like, it's okay, I've got you, you're fine, I love you as you are, we're gonna do it slowly. And it bumps up against this like Western, mostly masculine mentality, even that I have in my day-to-day life, which is like, no, things aren't gonna get done if I'm that easy. I'm not gonna be motivated. I'm gonna lose all my strength and power. Oh God, what's gonna happen, right? And that's the surrender. That's the like, how do we surrender to this medicine? Because it can be extremely powerful, just as powerful, if not more than ayahuasca. Just as powerful. I've had people tell me that countless times, like who've drank ayahuasca and come to drink mushrooms thinking, oh, it's just gonna be light and fun and giggly. When you show up to ceremony with psilocybin, it's like the difference between going to like recreational use, right? Like it's good. I always use this example. Like a friend says, hey, come over Thursday night, we're gonna have dinner. Great.
Yeah.
You walk in, there's a pizza, Netflix is on. They're like, oh yeah, grab a slice. Like we're gonna watch this movie. So you're like, cool, like hang out with my buddies, eat some food, right?
Yep.
And then a friend says, come over for dinner Saturday night. You walk in, there's candles, it's beautiful. They like brought in like a friend who's playing live jazz music.
Sure.
Like, oh, I'm making my grandmother's, you know, recipe of lasagna, and it's been passed down to me. And, you know, we open up a bottle of wine we've had for 15 years, and you're just like, right. And you're honored, and it's special. And there's something happening there. And both of those situations are beautiful, and they have their own time and they have their own purpose. But when they're just different, right? And
Sure.
so when you enter into a ceremony with mushrooms, it's like, this is a living conscious spirit. I've really it's hit me over the head enough for me to finally believe that. And you know, when you come to this infinite consciousness that has been on this planet for billions of years, collecting data of how to survive, like this is what the fungi do. They're like, how the fuck are we going to survive the next cataclysm, the next cataclysm? Y'all motherfuckers blowing yourselves up, right? Like they're here to impart to us that knowledge. So when we come to them and we say like, look at the beauty we've created for you, look at the altar, look at this, the serene nature that we come into this space, that we surrender, and we've danced and we've been in the ocean today and we've calmed our nervous system and we're ready to receive your knowledge. Like there is powerful medicine that comes from that, as opposed to like, oh, I'm just gonna go to the doctor's clinic and like take some psilocybin, then I'm gonna go do my life, and then maybe next Thursday I'll also like take some shrooms, and then I'll, right? Like,
Right. No, it's
yeah,
not the same as having that intent.
it's not the same. So that to me is what the retreat is. It's the mothering, it's the loving, and it's setting up your body and your brain and your nervous system and all other parts of the day, so that when you enter into ceremony, you can go as deep as possible. You can surrender as much as you possibly can in that moment. And you allow us as the leaders and as the facilitators to like truly hold you safely, your body, your mind, your spirit, completely safely in that container, to just fully like, seriously, like let your butthole go, let your mind go. You're right.
Yeah.
Like see what this medicine has for you.
No, I mean, in addition to some healing and therapeutic use, like what do you hope your clients will get from their experience with you?
You know, every time I see on the very last day that everyone's getting into this big van and they're going back to the airport, I really have a prayer in my heart. And it feels like all of these people are little spores. They're like little mushroom spores, and they're going out into the world. They're going back to their communities and back to their families, back to their homes, their jobs. And I see them as this tiny little piece of consciousness that's become aware, and that's become a little bit more loving and a little bit more accepting, and to just be planted back in their lives as the seeds and the awakening of all of humanity. And I really think that that's the way that we're going to do it. And this is where it goes back to the masculine feminine, is that, you know, the way of our most current history, a way to change has been the masculine way, is to revolt against the powers that already exist. So to revolt against the castle, to revolt against the banks, like we have to go against them in order to bring them down. Then everything crumbles and then we build anew. And the way of the feminine is like one by one, quiet, prayerful. It starts in the heart. It starts in the womb, in the nothing, in the creation. And one day you just like don't pay taxes anymore. And one day you just stop going to the bank. And one day you just are like, no thanks. And it's quiet. And like those things, those structures and systems that no longer serve us, just naturally kind of like, oh, right? We don't blow them up. We don't have to revolt. And so in that sense, like I'm not an activist like against anything. And I don't want people to know that, or I do want people to know that they don't have to be against in order to create something new. They can just be for. They can just be for. Yeah.
It's not trying to prove something else was right or wrong. It's just better forward.
Yeah. And that's what I hope for people. And I see it all the time. I see it. I get emails 6 months, a year later from people of just like, Amanda, let me tell you how my life is completely different. Let me tell you how I've gone off all of some people have been on 9, 10 different medication to wake up, to fall asleep, to do like for everything. They're just like, I was done. I went home and I was like, no more. You know, I'm always like, I fucking hope the pharmaceutical companies, there's like people at Pfizer being like, find this girl, you know, because it isn't even always people's intention to necessarily go off of their medication. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But I hear that so often where they're like, I just didn't really need it anymore. I have tools now. I have my breath. I have the community. You know, I have friends that I can contact and be like, hey, I'm down again, right? Like you were there with me. You went through this with me. Can you support me right now?
Well, it really helped me. So perspective shift, right? Like that's the fucking biggest thing that's ever come from psychedelics for me, is by far the perspective shift. And I realized that I do believe that my perspective is the reality that I'm in. And so if I'm going to operate in this perspective of scarcity and people are out to get me, then my reality is going to be real fucking scary.
Yep.
And it's going to get really alone, and it's going to probably lash out a lot because I have to fight for these resources. But the perspective, if I can manage to control my perspective, I can essentially control my reality. And I think that's psychedelics for me have given me access to the controls a lot better, to be able to be like, oh, like for example, right? Like that perspective about the boomers, like, oh, that's heavy. I'm not forgiving any of your bullshit, but that is a different plight than I showed up with. So I've microdosed psilocybin now for almost the last 2 years. I love the combination I take. I take a 1/4 gram capsule that's reishi, changa, lion's mane, cordyceps, and then like a 0.12 of psilocybin. I see people far more comfortable with like, oh, I could microdose. But no one wants, the heavy work is always something different. Like it's amazing to me the number of friends I have now that are pretty casual about like, take a gram or less. They're like, oh yeah, we take mushrooms. I'm like, kinda. How do you feel about that? Like, how do you, as a facilitator, people being more casual with microdosing or any of those type of things?
That's a great question. And you know, I hear that a lot from people. Like, maybe I shouldn't come to retreat. Maybe I should just microdose. Like, maybe I should do this first. Maybe I should. And, you know, I think like to the general population, if you don't have any contraindications, I really think that almost everyone should be microdosing. Like, I just think that mushrooms in general are just like such a fantastic part. I see them in a vision, like walking hand in hand, like this little mushroom with us, like, you know, on this path of humanity. So I do think there's power in that, but it's kind of like if you, it's the difference between kind of like pouring some water on your like driveway, right? And kind of like sweeping it off every now and then just getting a power washer and being like, what the fuck is all this dirt? How, I didn't even know it was this color. right? Like that's what a higher dose of mushrooms does, is like, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
You don't know what is standing in your way, and you don't have access to like the higher intelligence, right? You have this little computer right here, and you're not connected to the higher server that's going to be able to give you that information. So most healthy, somewhat, right, like somewhat healthy, and that varies how we define that.
Yeah,
People
healthy
who
is a
don't have,
tricky one.
it is, and and I let obviously a lot of like not very healthy people come to my retreats. I mean, that's what they're looking for. But if
Sure.
you don't have any medical contraindications to psilocybin, and that can be discussed with certain people, I think that most humans would do well to do 1 to 2 higher doses per year and then
Mhm.
microdose. Like, I think
Yeah.
that would be an amazing protocol. But like the higher doses where like, yeah, you lose a little bit of control and you surrender completely, and you are shown something deep, the next layer that really can be, and again, it's just shown. It's like, hey, you want to work on this? No? Okay. There's been many times, even with ayahuasca in the beginning, where it was like, hey, you want to work on this? And I'm like, fuck no. Right. And then I don't, right. And then I go back to like that same pattern because I'm not ready yet, or I don't feel
Right.
supported or have tools yet. So it's not like, it doesn't just give you things and be like, you're going to be patient, and now you're going to be loving, and now you're going to, no, it's just going to show you, hey, here's where your impatience is preventing you from being in close relationships. Here's some examples. Ooh, that hurts a little bit. Okay, I want to be patient. Okay. Now we're going to give you a bunch of tests in your life of being patient. Now we're going to give
Shit,
you
right.
opportunities, right? Like that's the hardest part of healing, is like, now we're going to give you
To
opportunities
integrate.
to, we're not going to give you a loving heart. We're going to give you the opportunity to be loving when it's
Yep.
really fucking hard.
And
Here's an asshole at your work,
whether it's given me the opportunity to be loving, like what it has done is typically when the built-in emotional path that I would typically use, which would be anger, frustration, fucking point towards you or get shitty, I have a minute to go, we don't have to do that. It's funny the stuff that it's still that I haven't gotten over the autopilot, right? Then like motherfuck, because there's stuff that'll anger me and I'll get so fucking worked up, and in the middle of it I'm like, in an hour, none of this will fucking matter and you won't care, and I still can't get away from it. It's and like, god damn it, dude, if we know that we're gonna feel this way in 30 minutes, can we just skip this step of being
Yeah.
really shitty and frustrated with the people around us, like, so that I don't have to go like,
This is like
sorry,
such a
everyone.
paradox that you're touching on. It's such a fucking paradox, which is like, yes, the spaciousness is there, right? Yes, that beauty of being like, oh, I can get angry, but I don't have to. And right, like that is such a beautiful gift to be the witness in your life. And then the paradox is like, you also have to feel your feelings.
Yeah.
So like if anger does come up, right? Like, and I've learned this over the last year, anger and frustration are for sure my go-to emotions, and it's usually really dumb stuff. Like I drop a water on the ground. And I'm like, motherfuck, right?
Yep.
It's usually really, really like insignificant things. And I think part of, we probably are running toward the end here, but to not talk too much about integration, but the word integration to me has changed wildly over the years of like what that means and how do I integrate? I want to integrate everything, right? And to me, a truly like integrated life is someone who has all of their light, all of their shadow, all of their anger and their love, and everything is like witnessed and held with the same love and the same respect. And even those moments where I was like, I didn't take a breath before I got angry. That's okay too, right? I'm going to bring love and I'm going to feel that. And I feel, especially this year, I've gotten to this point where I've cultivated enough through, Fit for Service, through having a personal coach. Like I got a lot of support, but I've cultivated enough to where I have enough love that I can actually feel full anger. Like I can feel it rising. I can feel frustration. I can feel the thought patterns coming, and not make it go away immediately. Right. And like, I think a lot of people talk about this as like clean anger, right? Not make it be aggression towards others, or not take it outward, not express that anger outward, but like really allow it to be in my body. And that's okay too. Even knowing, like you said, fuck man. And that makes it builds on itself when you say like, in 30 minutes, this is going to mean nothing. And
Right.
like, who cares if someone cut me off? Like, I'm never going to see them again. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't.
But if you don't allow it to like fully rise, like it just gets pressed down again. Then it becomes shame because like, why can't I control my anger when I'm driving? Right. And then
Yeah.
we have to do their mushroom journey to like find that shame spiral and that anger. So
Yep.
it's this beautiful combination of like feeling the frustration and the anger, allowing it to be there, and being okay with, okay, for most of the time, 9 times out of 10, I can take that space and not have it affect my day. And then every now and then it's too close and it affects me. There was a guy yesterday here in the hotel. I had the most beautiful day yesterday. I was like high vibing, getting stuff done. And I'm walking back. I'm about to talk to my coach, and I love my coach. I'm so excited to speak with her. I'm down in Mexico. Like where I'm at here, like we don't really have masks. Like the people who work in restaurants wear them, but it just like it hasn't been a thing for a while.
Where are you?
I'm near Puerto Vallarta, so Sayulita area.
Okay.
So West Coast. So I'm going to get in the elevator. There's a young man. He's probably like 30 years old, 29, like pretty young. And he was like, are you going to, just super aggressive. Like the second he sees me, are you going to put your mask on? And I was like, you know, first of all, I was like, excuse me, sir, I'm an older woman. Like you don't speak to me that way.
Okay.
But I was yeah, that's what I should have done. I was like, oh, I'm like, no, I'm just like going up to my room. Like, I don't have my mask, you know? And he's like, we're in the elevator. It's a hotel policy. He was like getting really mad at me.
Oh, man.
So I was just like,
Like,
dude,
cool. I'll step off the elevator. Does that help,
yeah,
man?
that's what I said, welcome to Mexico. Like we're really more chill here, you know, like it's fine. Right. But I got back to my hotel room and like that had affected me. I could feel my adrenaline. I could feel the anger. And, you know, before it started looping into stories of like, well, fuck that guy. And why is he even traveling if he's so scared of this? Like before it started to loop, which it could, and it has, like that, there was a little presence of like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that he feels that way. I'm sorry he's so scared of this still.
Yep.
You know, I'm sorry that me not wearing this thing made me feel that angry that soon. And you know, I didn't move immediately into like peace and love and like that guy's fine. Like I had to feel the anger and the aggression and that the adrenaline that caused in me and kind of be a little bit pissed for a second, while also like trusting that I have the tools and I have it, the capacity within me now. Thank God after this time to see it from all angles, to breathe, right? To acknowledge his pain, to acknowledge that that was scary for me too. Like he was a lot bigger than me. Like all of it was okay. I sat back down. I talked to my coach. We did a little bit of breathing together, and then it was like fine. You know, it was totally fine. So
no, you know, and that's so how long have you been living in Mexico?
I've been here since mid 2018. So I've been here quite a while. I almost have my permanent residency.
So as an expat over the last couple of years, like we travel a lot, and so like I get a kick out of news in other countries. And what I mean by that is like, so we happened to be in Iceland last year whenever everything with Afghanistan went down. And it was really fascinating to see the news coverage in Iceland because it's the main news station is their Euro one or it's BBC. And it simply stated the Americans withdrew from Afghanistan. This is what's happened. And then they went on to another story. And I was like, holy shit, that was just information. Like it wasn't op-ed, it wasn't fucking emotional, it wasn't brought all this other shit in it that manages this 24-hour news cycle that keeps people fucking tuned into fear. Like we learned years ago with Howard Stern, right? Like there's parts in his story where he's like, we found out that my fans that love the show would watch on average for 38 minutes a day. And the people that hated the show watched it for 55 minutes.
Whoa.
And so like, what does that say about us psychologically that we want to be mad? Like I think about that with social media and all those things right now that, you know, this thing doesn't have an opinion, nor does the algorithm, nor do I believe the algorithm or any of these things of social media have an intent. I believe it is a mirror. And at no point, if I was designing software for an algorithm, would I have said, so we'll just show them more of the stuff they look at, right? Because they look at stuff they like. And that seems logical because that's what you would do with your own private thing. Why would you look at things that infuriate you and make you angry and spend more time and comment on the negative stuff? It doesn't give a shit. It just knows you're interacting with it more. So I guess that's more of what we want.
Well, a counterpoint to that, have you seen The Social Dilemma?
I have.
Because the people who designed it like figured out what, because I mean, the reason they would have to make you stay on longer is like ad spend. So there is a reason to
100%.
keep you on 55 minutes as opposed to the 38 minutes of
But
like
it's
that.
not designed to keep you looking at shit that makes you mad. That's our
Right.
own psychology.
Right.
It's designed to keep you looking at whatever you want to look at more.
Powerful. Like, what is it about anger and frustration? Like, there is a charge to it. It's
It's
a powerful
uniting.
emotion.
Well, not only that, it gives you a chance to feel this side and feel right or vilified or any of those things. It's not
It's
one of
very
the
true.
emotions I work with on a regular basis. Like fear. I mean, that's kind of what
And
it feels like. America's #1 export currently is just
number
fear.
one. I was so glad that I wasn't. So to put it in perspective, when Trump was in president, I was in Ecuador and I was living on a mountain where we had limited Wi-Fi and like the
Perfect.
rules of the retreat were like no religion and politics. So like people literally, I had a friend in Washington D.C. and I would say, hey, if the world's gonna end or if there's like actually news that I have to know, can you call me? Because other than that, like I didn't watch the news for 3 years. And then people would be like, Trump said this and blah blah. I was like, I don't even whatever.
I don't give a
Then
shit what some game show host said.
no, I must have heard like 4 or 5 stories of him, and then like his last year, I think I was in Mexico, so I heard a little bit more. But being in Mexico is very similar. And I lived in Spain when I was like in my 20s, and it's a similar thing. Like when you're in when you're in the U.S., you feel like it's just the center of the fucking world, and that everyone cares as much as we do about all of these things. But it's so similar in Mexico. Like it will just be like when you were in Iceland, like this happened. No,
No, they don't give a shit.
no, they don't give a shit because they have their own things going on, right? Like Mexico, which is the neighboring sister to the United States, has its own history and culture and presidents and lifestyle and like their own version
Issue.
of like the matriarchy. Like they have like a completely different perspective on so many things. And not only that, but people here, like they just, depending on where you are, right? Cities and more rural, like beachy areas are very different, right? When I lived in Mexico City for 6 months during the pandemic, and like, there's more like propaganda and wear your mask for your grandpa and all the shit. Like there's much more of that in Mexico City because of the density of the population. But in Sayulita and these little beach towns and stuff, like they're just like, whatever, let's just like have music and family. And the core of Mexican culture is like the family. So like you're not going to tell me like don't see my family. Like that doesn't even make sense. First of all, we all live together.
Right. Right.
Like, no, that's not going to happen. So like to see from this perspective and this paradigm, and then also to see what was used against them, right? Like what was very much used against them was like in the propaganda with the mask, it was like, do it for love, do it for your abuela, right? Do it for like your community, because those were the things that like mattered the most.
Now, when
And
you
so
pop into the States, are you apprehensive of like,
when I first went to San Diego, I hadn't been to the US in 18 months for like the entire whole beginning of all the COVID, all the everything, right? I felt it in the airport when I landed. I felt palpable anxiety and division in the United States. And I was like, I am so sorry. Because I hadn't lived full time in the US in like 8 years. I'd visit and I'd do this and that, but like I hadn't lived, I didn't have an address in the US in a very long time. So,
right?
the first day I was there, I was in a park walking my dog in San Diego, this huge park. And I was like walking my dog, and he's kind of like, walking around, and he's a puppy. And he kind of came near, wanted to say hi to these women who were sitting on a blanket. And she looked at me and she was like, I don't have a mask on. And I honestly was like, I don't understand
I'm
that
aware.
sentence.
Yeah, I'm aware. I have eyes.
And so I looked at my mom. I literally was like trying to like translate this through. I was like, Mom, what is that? Why is she telling me that she's like, oh, she's saying not to get close to her because she's not wearing her mask. So like, don't walk your dog over there. And to me, like that was such a poignant moment, because I'm not sure, because I'm not Mexican. I spent a lot of time here, but and I have a lot of Mexican friends who can tell me maybe the reason for this, but it is not a thing here to just yell at someone something. Hey, go fuck, hey, fucking put this, you're on, hey, do that. Like, you just don't like tell people to do stuff. It's just not a polite thing, like maybe if you work in a store, the most you'll ever hear is like, oh, kubre boca, please. But like, it's quiet and it's polite. And like, so just this idea that you can just scream at people and tell them
I
what to
believe
do.
most of public should be handled like a library.
my gosh, right?
Right. That's something. So like friends of ours who've traveled to Japan and stuff like that, they're like, oh, that's no one is loud in public. Like he said, like friends on like if they're on the train or any of that, and like they get a call, like people will like, hey, I'm sorry, I'll call you back. I'm on the train, and then
Right.
they just bury their fucking phone in huge embarrassment. And
There's
like what
something really
different?
bad.
There's something different, right? And since most people in our country don't travel, they don't get that perspective of outside of the country. And I think it's really easy to sit here and going, well, and we're also taught that America's the best and everyone wants to be here. Why bother looking at anyone else's shit?
You
Until
unlearn that real quick when you go other places
you
where people
learn,
are
you
like,
unlearn it really fast. And it's not like everywhere is better. That's not the thing. There's just bits and pieces that you're like, fuck, I wish we did that instead.
yeah. And this whole idea that we're number one, I had this discussion with someone a few years back around a fire.
Ugh.
We're at society. He's like, well, America's still number one. It's still number one. And I was like,
In
what are we
what?
number one? We're like
Yeah, in what
37 in like
category?
health and obesity. We're like terrible in science. We're terrible in education. We're literally not number one. I'm like, maybe like,
Convicted citizens.
yeah, people we put in prison. I think we're like number one on that.
Incarcerated citizens.
I think we have
Um,
1% of the population and 25% of the prescription medication. I think we're number
yeah.
one in that.
Now,
We're not.
what I do believe, right? I do believe that the like American dream, like the opportunity in this country for self improvement, is still unbelievable. Like I don't
Yeah.
believe I get to do what I do for a living, living anywhere else.
Yeah.
And cool.
And that mindset, let me tell you, is so priceless. Like you can do what you want, you can be what you want, just go after it. Because I see that even in my Mexican friends, where it's like, to a certain degree, it's like they're comfortable with it, but it's like, you're born into kind of like this class structure, this area of town, this family. And there isn't as much of that, like that internal, like, but I want to be what I want to be, and I'm going to do it. And I want to be a chef. So I'm going to go there and I'm going to talk to that guy and I'm going to do this. Like there isn't quite as much of that. And there's negative and positive to both that. But I think you're right. Like and I credit a lot of my success to that, to just like, I can do it. I'm going to figure it out myself. I'm just going to put my head down and Google everything. I like do the longest chain. Like, this as an entrepreneur, like you'll just be like, how do I
God damn it. Yes. Yes.
like it's the longest question in the world, right? And somehow there's like a YouTube video, someone's like, I'm gonna explain this to you in 3 minutes, and you're like,
There's
yes.
so much information out available right now that choosing to be uneducated is a choice.
Dude,
That's a choice. It's not that you don't have access. It's a choice. I understand that maybe you haven't built the filter to learn how to decipher information.
Right.
But the way to decipher information is listen to as much of it as you can, and the shit that keeps getting repeated is possibly true.
I feel
That's
the same
it.
way. Speaking of like my anger that I'm not usually as able to step away from, is when people ask me like Googleable questions, like people that I work with and stuff. I was just like, I'm not Google, dude. I can't, like, if
I
it's,
know.
I tell people, I'm like, ask yourself, like when we're in this space and I have 100 things in my mind, ask yourself, like, can I Google this? And if not, if it's specifically about what we're doing this day, or like it's specifically about like our schedule, of course I'll answer that for you. But I don't have a lot of patience for like, well, I don't, I
No,
can think
dude,
of,
I'm not into helplessness.
yeah,
I'm not into helplessness from anyone in my life. Like that's one of the rules I have, and it's like, I'm only interested in your success as much as you are. I will
wow.
never fucking care more than you do. I have too much of my own shit because I want mine.
That's powerful medicine for me, because I've fallen into the trap of caring more
Well,
than
I think
someone else.
maybe as a facilitator who helps people, it's probably good that you have that, and maybe I don't.
With other like leaders, maybe with guests it is, but like with other leaders and other people that want to come into this like leadership position and facilitation, to like try to be like constantly like pulling them along when they don't have their own intrinsic motivation to do that, has been a detriment, right? Because then they start relying on me. Well, like, well, you do that and you fix this and you do that. And I was like, wait a minute. I am not being a good leader because I'm not creating new leaders. Like this has been a huge learning experience of like, I want to create people that within 6 to 12 months are like, here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to create. Here's what I want to do different. I was like, yes,
Dude,
that's what I want. I don't want you to be like, well, I don't know what I'm doing unless I'm here. No way.
Yeah,
Man.
since leaving Fit for Service, it really sparked my prior to that, I've had an interest in having a mentorship group and trying to figure out how to communicate with people and just be a resource, because I'd realized that how fortunate I was that I've got Kyle, or I've got an Aubrey, or I've got someone like you that I can call, or I've got other friends like that do any amazing number of random incredible things. I have the gnarliest group of close friends on earth, and I'm so grateful for it, because yeah, I've also worked my ass off to cultivate this rad group of people. They didn't find me. I
Amen.
found them, right?
Hmm.
This wasn't fucking what got issued to me from jump.
No
I
way.
went out and found these people. In the same way like we talked about at the opening of this, right? Like I have to go to them because I need it.
Mm,
I need to see their thing. I need to see their universe work. But I'm not interested in being a character in someone else's universe. I want to build my own.
hell yeah.
And so seeing what they've done with the mentorship group and stuff like that, I realized, like, thinking about my dad, right? That was kind of the impetus of a lot of the changes in my life started when he had passed away. Um, and it was just this big moment of, that was my moment of the reality of mortality. Is
Mhm.
he had died April 5th in 2014, pancreatic cancer, at 62, and I turned 31 the following day. And I was like, halfway. Are
Mm.
you halfway? And so that's what the mentorship group turned into, is this, for me, it's this idea of like, that's 1612 weeks. That's it.
Yeah,
For
I
all the
see your
things,
like, yes, this is
yeah,
amazing.
all the things that I want to get done in my life have to be done in the next 1612 weeks,
Mm.
or they don't get done. So either they're important or they're not. Pick and choose. Like, I don't believe in kind of halfway. And so kind of being able to share that with this group and talk about it, like, it's been, man, it's been really cool to find other people. And I'm not doing this as a fitness based thing yet. I believe taking care of the machine is a big part of what keeps operating at a high end. Me personally, my calling with how valuable psychedelics have been and how valuable these types of conversations of more mindfulness, more awareness have been to me. And I know my audience, right? Like, it's going to be guys and people coming over from strength and fitness that are a little bit more fuck is going on over there to woo woo.
Yeah.
Cool. These are still people that sports fans and doing the regular life thing and not awake, but there's something starting to click. That's an interest of, why is there not something more? And I thought
Mm.
about my dad, and I was like, dude, if he had an existential crisis at 30 or 40 or whatever it was, his six best friends are dudes from his hometown that have the same job as him.
Mm.
Like, where's his fucking Aubrey to call when shit's heavy? He doesn't have one. And so, like, maybe I can fucking be that. And I can put this lighthouse out for other fucking weirdos like me. And part of that, my responsibility of like keeping my body in check and fucking staying sharp and making sure my business is on point and Bonnie and I's relationship feels great and we're constantly working on checking in with each other. It's because if there's holes in it, you can write off the power of this.
Wow.
If you're on the outside looking in at my shit and you're like, yeah, but he's fucking fat, or oh, he doesn't take care of himself, or him and his chick, blah blah blah, it's always drama. You can
Mhm.
discredit the power of whatever this has been in my life.
Mm.
And I don't want to give you a loophole.
That's a lot to hold. That's a lot to hold
I'll
together.
try.
Like,
I'll try.
fucking an amazing job.
I'll try, right? So something came up for me in a mushroom trip uh, the other day, a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to run it by you. As people who communicate about our experience, uh, I realize that I've avoided some bigger journeys uh, because I get really intimidated by the burden of how I'm going to explain it.
Mm. So you feel like you've intentionally
Well,
not.
like, I know that there's definitely a hang up. I know that there's a hang up of like, when I'm in it, I'm constantly thinking about, how do I explain this powerfully? Like I feel like I'm trying to mine for the good stuff on purpose. But like, I need this fucking breakthrough concept, or I want this, and I need to be able to explain to people why this was so strong. Instead of just like, what if we never told anyone we did this and it was just for you? I was like, fascinating. Because so much is public of what we do. And so sharing that experience or any of that, like, so what if this is just your thing?
Would it be enough? Would it
Yeah.
be enough if it's just for you?
And it is. It's the illusion that I've created of like, I have to find the words to
Mm.
express this to want people to want to do it, when the reality is if I just lived a more kick-ass life and I was happier and rad with the people around and operated out of love, which all of that medicine does for me, I would be better off. So I don't know what my question is now that I've answered
I
it.
think you just answered it. Well, this happens to me all the time where people were like, "Is that a question?" I was like, "Oh no, I just had to say it out loud and then I figured it out and now I'm
Yep.
done." You know, like the reflection. But yeah, if I could reflect something to you, because I feel so similar, and it starts to get, it starts to become meta, and it starts to fold in on itself when you're in these journeys and you're like, okay, how am I going to write this down? And then how am I going to interpret it? And what is that going to mean for other people? And how is that going to, I mean, when you're in the journey and like these things are appearing to you or these ideas are coming to you and you're still trapped in that, and social media is a big part of this, right? Like, how is this going to be part of my mythology and part of my story and part of my teachings? When really it could just be your own treasure, right? Your own thing. And what came up for me that I remind myself constantly, Abraham Hicks is one of my favorite teachers, kind of like law of attraction, which everyone kind of gets wrong and we all get wrong, but that's a whole different topic. But she always says words don't teach, energy teaches. Like, words don't teach, even though we use words, right? Like, I love podcasts, I love reading. Like, words are obviously a method of translating. Words don't teach, and so I think in those moments what helps me to surrender is just that I really view the medicine space as just these sacred, 4, 5, 6 hours where I can just completely allow my mind and brain and body, everything, to let go and trust. And this is where like trusting the medicine comes in. Like, trust that this information and this data and these downloads are sacred. They're going to be held in my heart and they're going to be held in my vibration. And in the exact right moment when someone says, "Hey, Amanda, how do I do this?"
Hmm.
Something in my energy is going to like spark, and something that was hidden in my heart is going to be just that right moment. Maybe it's not even a word. Maybe it's like a nod, or maybe it's like a smile,
Yeah.
or maybe it's a hug, or maybe it's something, but I have to trust that it's not going to be from my own power that I'm going to be able to like intellectually take all of this data and then put it through all of my systems and then out into the world. Because usually, most of the time, people get a little, we have fun chatting at the retreats, and there's, different philosophies and quotes and things that are
Sure.
impactful. But most of the time, it is in those silent moments of like, same in Fit for Service, right? Like the quiet moments, like the embraces, the glances, like these are the things that teach us deeply to our core. So it's all gonna come out there. It's all gonna come in perfect timing. It's all gonna be great. And I think I would love to just have you in a space where like you're in that complete disconnect and surrender for yourself, for
I
your
would love it.
relationship.
Yeah, same. And that's
So good.
something that, like Bonnie and I talked about. I'm like, yo, I need to schedule once a month that I take time to have a day. Um,
100%.
Now I've recently started using some of the chocolate bars,
Okay.
and I saw that you'd made a post a little bit about just methods of preparation. How do you guys? I know you talked about a drink. So do you do it? You do a tea?
We do tea. Yeah. We've done a few different things. We've always done tea from the beginning. And it's a few different reasons. One, tea is very ceremonial in many different cultures, right? Drinking tea together, just like having something that's special and sacred and warm. There's so much to it.
Mm.
From a more scientific standpoint, for me, in a group setting, it's the best way to make sure that the dosing is equal between all the people, right? So we take usually quite a bit, maybe 200-300 grams of mushrooms, and they're blended down to a powder so that
Mhm.
the active ingredients are distributed evenly. So that way, when we serve, 1 gram to this person, 1 gram to this person, it's going to be the same.
Okay.
Pretty much. you know. Also, we have ginger and lemon in the tea, which makes the ginger is great for your tummy if you have a little bit of nausea. It makes it just a pleasant experience. It tends to be faster acting, like as in, I mean, most people feel the effects come on within 10 to 20 minutes, as
Yeah,
opposed to like eating
that's
a whole.
typically been my mushroom. If other than using like a capsule, which of course has to dissolve in your stomach like any other type of drug, yeah, it's
Yeah.
a much
Well,
quicker intake than cannabis on an edible.
oh gosh, yeah,
You
I
don't have a
remember
90-minute window.
that waiting period, for people, most people who come to our retreat, it's either their first time or their first time in a long time. And then that varies. Then there'll be like 2 or 3 people that are just like, I'm experienced, but I wanted to come to a place where I could surrender and have them
Same.
take care of me. I
Yeah.
just wanted everything. I wanted the chef to cook the food. I want to be in a beautiful place. I want to just completely go into this. But for a lot of people, it's their first time. So to not have that 45, 50-minute window of just like, dee, 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 where you're like waiting for the effects to come on, within, yeah, like I mean, for me, it's 5 minutes. It's so fast that I'm just like, oh, the mushrooms are here. I'm
And
starting
and,
to feel.
and I think one of the mistakes I think people do make with the microdosing is like I kind of translate it as it speaks in real whispers at that level.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know what the sound of it is at a yell, like maybe you can't hear the whisper. At least for me, like I need to know what the sledgehammer is on the other side of it. Like just doing microdose, I think it would be really easy to be like, oh, I don't feel anything. But after
Yeah.
knowing what a big dose
Technically,
is,
technically with microdosing, this happens a lot where I feel like the word microdosing is getting really confusing with like recreational dosing, where people are like,
yes,
oh, I'm gonna microdose mushrooms, I'm gonna take a gram. I'm like, wait a
gram is
minute.
not a microdose. You're 10 times over where we should be.
The true definition of microdosing is sub-perceptual, meaning like you should not
Yes.
have, you should be able to drive, work,
I just know something else is in the operating system. That's the only way I can describe it. I've got to get really quiet and really still to find it. But
wow.
the more I journey, I can find it. Like I'm better at finding whatever buzziness that happens from psychedelics is unique. And I think so many people only have experience with alcohol as their drug. And so that's most people's idea of altered consciousness is drunk. And so of course they want to avoid it.
Yeah. And also people ask me that all the time. They're like, am I going to forget this? Like, is it just going to be this like forgettable? I was like, it's not like that. It's not like blacking out. I was like, you're going to remember so much. And not only that, but like you remember things over time, right? I think the integration, like you don't always need it until it's necessary. So, if you get a lesson, like say you go through an ancestral healing where you realize that, like for me, like I realized, that my mother and grandmother were like, so I saw them as these like held like tiny little like women in almost like a cage. Like they were so suppressed in the way that they had their hair and their body and everything was just had to be this one little thing. And I was like, why am I seeing this? This is so like, I understand that. And like blah, 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 blah. Right. And where that has unraveled and where that lesson has come out for me is realizing in my own body with like the journey with my body, which is like since I can remember 4 or 5 years old, I've always been the big girl, the bigger body. Oh, you're big, right? Like there's always been this like narrative of that. And what the mushrooms were like kind of telling me in that point is like, you need to be able to see your bigness, your big hair, your big body, your big boobs, your big loud voice. You're like, this is a gift to you. This is a gift to you to be free as possible. And the way that I've approached, and this is such a lifetime journey with my body. Like about 10 years ago, I used self-hatred to like lose like 60 pounds. Yeah. And I was just like, fuck you, you fat ass, get in the gym, you're disgusting for like months and months and months and months and months and months and months, right? And it worked, quote unquote, like my body got smaller, I remember getting to this like magical goal weight and looking in the mirror, and I hated myself more than I had ever hated myself in my life. And I looked through my eyes, I looked more disgusting than I had ever looked in my life. And I was like, you're still bigger than everyone. You're still this, right? And it didn't take, it was years and years later that I realized that like, you can't practice self-hatred for like a year straight, that every piece of food that comes into your mouth, you're like, eat the turkey, you can't eat the beef because the beef has more calories per ounce, right? Like you can't. And then all of a sudden one day you arrive to a number and you're like, look at me, I'm so beautiful and I love everything about me, because you weren't practicing that. You
No.
weren't practicing it, which is why I've met bodybuilders. I worked with a bodybuilder who just hated himself. And he's like, why am I on this stage? Why am I injecting this shit into my veins? Like, who am I doing this for? I hate
Right.
it. I hate my body, you know? And he looks from the outside like, wow,
Of course.
muscle man, like so beautiful, you know?
Yeah, of course. I think
So,
everyone's own interpretation of their body is a really fascinating thing, and like I've been lucky enough to change mine quite a bit. Um, and and
I
dude,
love
I have to say so much that from Fit for Service, and especially as in the competition that we did
yeah.
through that, of all the people around that weekend, like you were a very memorable light for me. And so I think it's really important for me to tell you that. I don't think enough people share when those things click in, that like I knew that I wanted to have some people on the podcast at some point about this, and I knew you were one.
Mm.
Like there was an energy and light and love around you, and I just really appreciate it. I really appreciate what you do, man.
Wow. I'm working on receiving that, and I do receive that. Thank you.
I
Because
understand.
big, when you reached out to me about this podcast, I was like, how does this guy know who I am? Like, you
Fuck,
know,
man,
I
we
think
interacted for a full weekend. Like, dude, I get it, and I get the full.
there
Like,
was, 200 people there,
I
right? It
know,
wasn't like
I
we're
know.
in like this tiny little group, you know. I
I
was like,
want you to
oh,
know how forgettable I believe I am as well. Like that is a thing I absolutely go through with, whether that's with, yeah, I always, Bonnie and I laugh and we call it our super friends because we've got a bunch of gnarly friends doing wacky shit. And I just assume that always, like, and not until the fourth or fifth time do we cross paths will they actually have any idea who I am. And that's never
really?
been the case, but I have it, dude. That's still there.
Isn't that funny?
Yep. It's there for everyone. And if I have it, who, like, of course below me has it, but or above me has it. In any direction you want to go, it's the same bullshit.
I know. It's like this virus. It's like this
Fuck, I
stupid,
hate using above and below, but whatever.
No, I know what you mean. I know. No, I know what you mean. Like as far as absolutely, we're all on this path. And like, how old are you now?
38.
38. Okay, so like for example, someone who's 28, right? Like we were there at that time, like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Like even just looking at it in that perspective, like and hearing you, it's so interesting. Like hearing these words, hearing you say this of like that, I had that light and that energy around me. I'm still, I have such compassion for the woman and the girl who at any other moment other than now, right when you said that, would have been like, oh, he's just saying that because I'm like big. He's just saying that because I stick out as like, this person.
No
He's just
fucking
saying
way.
that to make me feel better, right? Like, but this
I
was
don't.
the
I don't know
story.
you a compliment.
No, but like I have such compassion for that belief system, right? That like when people would tell me these things, like, wow, I love your energy, or wow, this, I'm like, oh, they're just being nice. Oh, they're just like talking down to me. Like, here's a little nice thing to say, little girl, right? Like, what a mean way to view myself. What a mean fucking like
Yeah,
thing to say.
dude.
And so I'm
Prior
working on
prior
on
prior to that
changing.
weekend, I was terrified going into that weekend.
Really?
And the
That was like,
terrified part, right? Like I'm not worried about the information. I'm not worried about vulnerability. I'm not worried about any of that. What
yeah.
I felt is that group and Aubrey and On It have been such an impactful part of my journey. Dude, I can't express how rad Aubrey has been. And fucking sit here and suck his dick on this podcast while he's not around.
Aubrey, you was.
But dude, like
Yeah.
I've had some really interesting experiences with him. Being years ago, both being out on the West Coast working and realized we're both in Venice, we hook up and go hang out for a couple nights and do dinner and it's just us. And it's not a work thing. And it's oh yeah, like we're friends. Like that part to me is always the hard one that it's tough for me to let in, is the realization that we're actually friends and I'm not trying to sneak in. Like they actually enjoy my company. Like that's the imposter syndrome.
I bet he
Or
gets that all
that
the
I'm
time.
valuable.
I bet he gets that all the time
I'm
with people
sure.
where they're like, they're just trying to like get into like my inner circle and they're not my actual friend.
And
Like I wonder what.
I'm so careful of that with my friends that I get to be around, because I also realize they don't have friends. Everyone in their universe tends to be someone on their payroll. And that gets really tricky. It gets really tricky.
That's what I was looking for in Fit for Service, because I came into last year feeling that way. I was
Yeah.
like, the closest people in my life, I pay them.
Yeah. It's
You
really
know, and
tricky, dude.
is saying things and doing things because they want to keep doing this work, and I pay them.
And it's like,
Ugh.
I trust the people that work for me, but they're not peers the same way as someone else who's solving the problems I'm solving. Someone else that's operating their own universe and spaceship, that they're building their own world. I'm not a character in theirs, right? Like employees of mine are kind of characters in my universe. I'm not a character in Aubrey's. And so getting to see those guys build these universes and create has been so fucking powerful. I mean, twice now I've been out west, and he's noticed through my travel online and been like, "Holy shit, dude! If you're around Sedona, go stay at the ranch." And so, like, I've been to the ranch twice now, and stayed for 4 nights one time, and stayed for, I don't know, 4 or 5 nights the other time, and I've never been to the ranch with anyone else. I have no idea what experience being there is with other humans. I've only been there by myself, or with my mom was there with me last year. When my mom and I and Bonnie did Black Friday there, because that's where we were road tripping around. And he was like, "Yeah, just go stay at the house and go stay there, and you have Wi-Fi." And we did Thanksgiving cooked there. And you're like, yo, he doesn't fucking know me to open doors to that place. And so, like,
is that how he felt, or is that what he
that's
said?
how I feel. Like,
Okay.
we're not lifetime long buddies.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and if he's going to open the door to this and just be like, yo, my universe is a resource to you, then I need to be doing the same.
Yeah.
I know how that makes me feel.
Yeah.
And I want to make people feel that way.
And that's how Aubrey makes people feel. And it's because it's genuine. Like he makes you, it's just, it's such a great lesson. And I think that as someone, you know, like you said, like that's really impactful to say, you know, certain people, and you're one of them and he's one of them, and I know others, like we are kind of on the leading edge of creation, and we are the center of our own universes, and we have a vision, and we're building something that, and this has been fucking hard for me this year, man.
I don't know
Without,
if
like,
center of the universe or architect. I'll go with architect. Center of it, I don't know that I'm sure of. I'm not sure I'm at the fucking wheel totally, but
well, from a physics standpoint, in an infinite space, every point is the center. So technically we are the center.
I can go with that.
But I mean, as opposed to, like, you know, and this is just comes from different archetypes, right? Like there's different human design archetypes. There's different types of people that need to be in a support role, that need to be like a good soldier, that need to be a leader. Like we all have these different paths, and sometimes we walk many different ones. But when you're creating something like your own brand, your podcast, your life, right? Like you're not working currently for someone else's dream, right? And neither am I. I have before. I worked for many other people's dreams.
Yep.
And so when we do that, like part of the, you know, the downside, and my business coach told me this in the beginning. She was a woman who's like insanely smart in business and also crazy psychic, and always somehow predicts things like 6 months ahead of time.
All right.
She said, Amanda, you know, being the boss can be very lonely. It can be very lonely, and you need to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And I am okay with that, because I actually really love my alone time, and I have a shit ton of friends, like you said, like all over the world. I just got back from 3 weeks in Costa Rica with community, like, so it's, I think it's important, that lesson from Aubrey, which is like to let people in, you know, to your world, like literally and physically. Like I just met these 2 women through this random circumstance. I felt really connected with them. I was in Austin for about 10 days, and we dropped in really deep. I didn't know them for hardly any amount of time, but they were on a road trip through California, and we're messaging, and I was like, hey, my parents have a place out in the desert. You're more than welcome to stay there if you guys have been camping for a while and you want to like stay in like, go in a jacuzzi and like stay in like an actual
Right.
place. And I love that. I love giving
Same.
trust to people and giving them these resources. What's the point? What's the point of building these universes and having all of this if we aren't
No,
open and honoring and sharing with that? So I'm glad that, I follow you too. I followed you all through Iceland. You have such a great way of engaging your audience and like what you're actually going through and what you're learning and physically what you're doing. And so when you reached out to me about this podcast, I was like, I really felt like he knows me. Like I know him, I know Bonnie, and I know what they're doing, and I know his brand, and I know his travels and his adventures. But it goes back to what we were saying about, energy. Like we felt each other's energy that day.
for sure.
We connected. And I mean, never in my life during those elemental games were so impactful for me on a million different levels. But one of the biggest one is I don't think that I have kept my adrenaline and energy at that level for that long in my entire life. It was like 6 hours of
that
like
was one of the hardest days I've ever had. And that's really strange to say. I've done some fucking really challenging shit. And like when I sat down at the end of it and everyone would just kind of started dancing, like I didn't have anything. Like I sat and like I got emotional and I was empty. And going to host a competition, and especially as an athlete, like, there's nothing I want more than to be fucking part of that. Like to see Aubrey and Kyle, right, first square off for the wrestling, right? Like that feeling and that energy that's in, like, there's nothing I want to know more than where I stand up between the two of them and how this goes. Like that's the difference, right? Like, fuck yeah, I'm in.
Wow.
And I can't.
Yeah.
Not because I'm hosting, but because I physically can't anymore. I'm compromised. Like I had total knee replacement a couple years ago. My hip's a little jacked up. It wouldn't be very smart.
Right.
It'd be a really high risk, low reward decision.
Yeah. The Greco-Roman style being thrown onto the ground.
Oh, it's a stupid idea. Stupid idea. Oh, this went poorly? No shit. Good work, ego. But man, like so while it felt the same as like preparing for a competition for me to host that thing, my goal was when this is done, I'm empty. Like I want to know I didn't have anything left to give these people. And I was. And I felt really good about it.
You were like in the most beautiful way.
I had
think
so
that, like,
much fun.
Looking back, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have approached him in that moment, but I really felt like the call to like approach you in that moment when you were sitting by yourself and just like, because I just felt you on such a deep level of like what you give, and the place from where you give it, which is even more important because some people give a lot from a place of like really expecting an expectation of the reward and an expectation of the glory and expectation. You can feel that. And they still may be on the outside giving a lot, but you gave from such a place of like pure, it was almost like childlike of just like, I'm so excited to be here. I'm so honored. I'm so fucking pumped. I love everyone here. And I'm going to like give you everything I have to make this the most exciting, energetic, fantastical, mythological, magical day. And you were a huge part of that. Like we could not have done that without you. It would not have, you were holding that and guiding.
It would have been different.
It would have been way different. And I really, like, I didn't know you at that point.
I don't know who else hosted. Yeah, I don't know who else hosted other than me, but it would have just been a different experience.
But you being the host, I was just like, does he do this? Like, is he a professional kind of like,
no, not even
like wrestling, like host of events? And I was like, what is even that job? Like this is such a like interesting job to be like this MC, referee, hype man. Like it was so many different things that you were doing that you brought to that. And I think that it was very obvious that you innately were bringing all of that. Like no one sat you down and said, okay, here's what you have to do.
Here's how it goes. No, I had very little direction other than I know how impactful weekends like this can be for people who've decided to come out of their shell and show up. And not only, look, this is an investment of people's time and weekend and money to want this improvement from something like Fit for Service and being part of that. And so I got the opportunity to bring my skills and make this a better experience for everyone there. I'm fucking in. I'm in. Let me perform.
Let me perform. You're such a performer.
Yeah, dude.
That's great, man.
That is true.
Like, God, that was fun. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're going to try to replicate it this year in some way. I've been hearing some rumblings of that, but it will never. Obviously, nothing can ever touch like that.
Bring me back. I'll come back. I'll yell at people.
Oh, I was also like slightly. I wish there was a more positive word for jealousy, but like, what is it? Like, just envious? No, that's also. I just was, you know, I always joke with everyone. I was like, give me a microphone and in any job, it's like my dream job. I used to have dream jobs of being like the like entertainment host on like a cruise ship because they just get to like play games with and they have a fucking microphone all the time, right? That's why I liked comedy. And like even to this degree, people joke like you should get a microphone for like what you do at your retreats. And I was like, no, please don't do that. But like seeing you in that position, it's like, you know, that space holder energy, but in a positive, beautiful environment. And that's what moved me out of the comedy world. Like it was so fucking dark, man, in New York City. Like the amount of competition and depression and like depravity that's in the entertainment industry. I was like, I do not want to do this. Like this is not worth whatever goal I'm going after. And I remember distinctly, and this is how funny the universe is, my best friend, I was super frustrated in New York. And she was annoyed by me of like, you don't know what you're doing. You're a server, but you don't want to do that. What do you want to do? And she was like, what do you want to do, Amanda? Like not a job, but like if you just wake up and there's no money, like what do you really want to do? And I kind of threw my hands in the air and I was like, I just want to talk to people and laugh.
Fuck yeah, dude.
That isn't a job, you know, like that isn't a job. That's all that was the limited mindset I was in. And now I get to like give people mushrooms in a beautiful setting, in a vulnerable space. We get to laugh together, talk about like we get to dive deep so quickly into our lives. And there's this element of complete non-judgment and everyone shows up with just their cards on the table. And then we get to like take psychedelics and eat beautiful food that's cooked by a woman whose mom is a famous chef. Like it's just, I look back and at the world that is now that I'm in. And it came from that moment of desperation of just being like, I just love people and I want to talk to them about their lives. And I also like laughter because that makes us feel good and community, you know, and just being like, I don't know what that means for me, but that's what I want.
I love that. I love that. And look, and it's helped me find what I believe my purpose is and like what turns me on. And there's some part of me that loves the business side of shit that I do, but that isn't the thing. Like that thing or making money is a cool side effect of doing other shit right, of serving my audience, of serving my crowd that buys into this message I've got about self-improvement and not tolerating my own bullshit. That being aware of it and you know, getting that side of it, I realized like where it's boiled down to of like, what is it you want to fucking do? What is it your job is? What is it the thing is that you love about this that can't be taken away from you no matter what the today's task is? I love creating. I want to create this conversation. I want to create an environment that people can rise and shine in this thing, this competition thing, because I'll be louder than you. I won't be the thing. I promise you can go as nuts as you want to. I'll match you. I'll give you the right to do it. Right? Like I want to create designs that inspire people. I want to create designs that force me to be uncomfortable. Like I want to create. And I don't care what it is I'm creating anymore.
You're a powerful creator.
I'm trying to get better at it.
You are.
Dude, Amanda, thank you so much.
You're a baby and a shaman. That's what I always say. My friend would say, you're a baby and a shaman, Amanda. You're a baby and a shaman. Like, don't forget that. Like, you don't know what you're doing, and you do know what you're doing.
Yep.
And you're ancient, but you're also learning. Like, you're both, right? You are a powerful creator, and you're trying, and you're learning. Like, both. You don't have to choose one. And I see that in you. I see that creation. And there's such joy in what you create because it's like you're just like so happy to like bring all of everything you do, like all of your like the products you make and the colors and the clothing and everything is like look what I made, right? It's like this pride and beauty and people like it because of that, you know.
I'm really excited they do.
Yeah, of course. Oh my god, it's such an honor. It's been such an honor. I'm totally like 30 minutes late to talking to a business coach that I was like,
sorry.
And I was like, you want I grow my business and then I show up all late. I'm like, well, also life happens, and
Yeah.
this is important at this moment.
Dude, I'll DM you. Let's figure out something. Let's just figure out something. I'd love to figure out to do something more.
Can I do a little plug of like what's coming up this
Please,
year?
God, yes. Please let them have it.
Because it's a huge year. Talking about creation, it's a huge year for us. So we are expanding greatly because there is a desire for so many people to come into this medicine. And what I need in this next year are more facilitators. I need to be able to train people to do this work from the heart with compassion, and also to build the strength that it takes to be around this much energy, because they're very intense weeks. And so what we're going to be doing is in April, we're starting our facilitator training, which is going to be a combination of, like 4 weeks of online learning, a 8-day retreat where we just go super deep with each other. We're going to be taking medicine together. We're going to be integrating. We're going to be developing our own workshops, our own gifts. And it's a time for people to come and learn who they are as leaders and as facilitators, and also to drop into their own space of healing, to find those places within them that to make them fit for service, right? To use that phrase. So that's coming up. And from that, I really hope to meet more people that can come and work with me, because I'm always in need of dedicated people on this path that really want to be in service. And all of that will be leading up to next year in 2023, where we will be opening a retreat center in Oregon. So one of the first. I know. It's so exciting. Everything has fallen into place. There was a woman who's a lawyer who's writing all of the legislation for Oregon, and she came to a retreat in April. Didn't even tell me that was what she was doing, but at the end she's like, oh, by the way, I have a secondary reason for being here. And I was like, what is it? And she's like, well, I wanted to see your methodology. I wanted to see what you do, this more like shamanic heart-based, like feminine approach, so that we can write that into the legislation in Oregon. So it isn't just MDs and clinical and go to the, So yeah, so it's all like beautifully part of the plan. And so we're going to need some people to be there. And that's what we're doing. In addition to our retreats, right? In addition to our week-long retreats, there's going to be a lot coming up this year. So the mushrooms are growing, little spores are being planted throughout the whole world. And
building the universe, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
Cool. This is rad. I could do this all day.
Same.
And I'm so glad that you do. It's so inspiring.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll be in touch. Let's figure out something. I'll figure out a way to get to Mexico, Bonnie, and I'll figure something out.
Please. I mean,
yeah. And I mean, look, even with the group I'm working with, I know that this conversation is going to come up, because they know that's a history of what's gotten me to where I am. While I'm not basing the group on psychedelics, right? Like, that's not the overall message of the group, but this is a tool that has been beneficial for me, and I'm not pretending it hasn't been. And so, I don't know if the group's interested by the end of the year, and like, hey, Bonnie and I are going down to do this. If anyone else is interested, these are the dates.
And that's what we're also, this is another thing, so many projects we're starting to do this year is like facilitate leaders who want to bring a specific group, right? So there's a psychologist we're working with who works with a specific group of people that she wants to be, like kind of co-facilitating and collaborating for like very specific retreats. So that's also a possibility too.
Very cool.
It's exciting.
Everything's possible.
I love you. Mad love to you and your girl and your brand and your energy and everything that you are giving to this world and being in service. You've truly motivated me to stop with the bullshit excuses, because there's always those lagging little. Of course there is.
Of course there is. Look, it's either important to me or it isn't. It's black and white. And if it's important to me, I have to do it. It can't be important to someone else. And if it's not important to me, admit that it isn't and move the fuck on. Find something that is.
Thank you for that. It's like a masculine, beautiful slap upside the head.
Right. And look, I tell that to people, whether that's, health or weight loss or fucking training or wanting to be stronger or any of that, is like, it's either really important to you or it isn't. And it doesn't have to be. And if it's not, stop fucking wasting time on it and go find something that is.
Right. I agree. Cool.
So I love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
I will. And I'll send you all this whenever we launch it.
Too, by the way, I'm going to be.
I would love to.
it's going to be super exciting. And it's called What a Trip: Adventures in the Psychedelic Space, and we're going to be going into your psychedelic trips and like.
I would love to discuss. I would love to come on and be a guest. You just tell me when.
Cool. We'll do.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for listening, and hell yeah.
Thanks, guys. See you later.